Okay, I'm calling the first regular meeting of the 108th year of the Paradise Valley Unified School District Governing Board to order. I would appreciate it if you would rise for the pledge. Okay, can you get it now? Okay. After call to order, I would appreciate if everyone would rise, and Mr. Appleman will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. May I have roll call, please?
Mrs. Matura?
Here.
Mrs. Greenberg?
Here.
Mrs. Bacon?
Here.
Mrs. Brown? Here. Mrs. Case?
Here. Next on the agenda is approval of agenda. Dr. Bales.
Good evening. Items approved by consent will not come up for discussion during the meeting, but will be approved when the agenda is adopted. This is possible since members of the governing board receive the agenda along with backup materials at least 24 hours prior to the meeting and have had time to review and consider all items. Prior to the agenda being adopted, members of the governing board or audience may ask that an item be removed from the consent agenda and brought to the floor for discussion at the appropriate place on the agenda. I would like to offer the agenda as posted.
Thank you, Dr. Bales. Does any member of the governing board wish to remove anything or move anything from the consent agenda? Does any member of the audience? Seeing none, Mrs. Brown, may I have a motion?
So moved.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes, and we will follow the agenda as posted. Next on the agenda is governing board statements. I'm looking off to my left. Mrs. Case, do you have?
I just want to say welcome back to teachers and students and parents for a new school year, and I hope it all goes even better than last year. We can all hope. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to say the same thing. Welcome back to students and teachers, parents, and community members who are in our schools. It's going to be a good year, and we're grateful to have kids back in classrooms and learning from teachers who love the jobs that they do. So thank you.
Mrs. Brown?
Ditto what they said, but also I would like to thank all of the parents and community members and teachers for their emails and input since our last meeting. I appreciate how much time and energy that people have put in. I appreciate that their students' education are important to them, and we're listening. And so I just want to say thank you again.
I wanted to say everything that's already been said, but also I wanted to let everyone know that teachers have already been back and they are excited, and some of them have been in trainings, and they're very excited to be back in the classrooms with the kids. So everyone's looking forward to a great year. I wanted to say thank you to the teachers for all you do for our families and our students, and appreciate you starting off the new year.
Before I say welcome back, I'd also like to say congratulations. On July 29th, we held a summer graduation for all of our students who were doing some credit recovery or otherwise taking classes over summer school. And I want to thank Mr. Long and our high school principals for organizing it. We had 14 students actually walk, and every one of our high schools was represented, and it was amazing. And I think it's something that will become another PV tradition. And it was an honor to be there on behalf of the board. I'd also like to thank Dr. Holmes and everyone in PVA as well for yesterday's new certificated employee event. We had orientation for new employees, both in the morning for elementary and in the afternoon for secondary, and just a lot of great information and a lot of very enthusiastic folks. And it was lovely to be there as well. And like everyone else, I am looking forward to the new year. I want to thank our community, our teachers, our students for all being ready and for what I expect will be an amazing year of learning. So with that, we will move to call to the public because we have no awards and recognitions today. Before I get to the cards, I would like to let everyone know that because our meetings are made available to a virtual audience, Paradise Valley Unified School District has implemented a process to collect virtual public comments. Members of the public wishing to submit these comments to the governing board for this meeting were able to do so by completing the public comment form located on the homepage of the district's website. In order to be included in tonight's meeting, members of the public were encouraged to complete the public comment form by noon today. It is important to note all comments related to board agenda items that were received by today's noon deadline were provided to all of the governing board members and the superintendent's office in advance of tonight's meeting. These comments will not be read aloud during the meeting. We would like to thank our community for voicing their thoughts and providing comments for tonight's meeting, and we received a total of 159 comment submissions. So with that, we did receive quite a number of cards, and given the extensive amount we have on the agenda today, we are going to limit each to 90 seconds or a minute and a half for call to the public. And I apologize, I don't have these in an order because we were going through, so I'm just going to take them as I have them. The first person I have is Summer Bagley.
Good evening. I would like to say that seeing my two older sons attend their high school orientation last night warmed my heart. And it also warmed my heart to see so many faces, smiles, and so many genuinely excited about students returning to a normal year. It has been really wonderful. It has also been a long and strenuous year for everyone. For those who have fought hard to keep our personal freedoms, bodily autonomy, and medical freedoms alive, I thank you. You are the true heroes, and we continue to hold the line and keep this board accountable to follow the letter of the law here in Arizona. To reiterate what our governor has said, Arizona does not allow mask mandates, vaccine passports, or discrimination in schools based on who is or isn't vaccinated. We passed all of this into law, and it will not be changed. In addition, Arizona carries all three exemptions under law for all vaccines for every child at any school at any time. It is the parent's choice whether or not to vaccinate. No shots, no school is not true. If you need exemptions, please see me afterwards. Lastly, I do not consent to vaccine clinics at my child's school. I do not consent to pooled testing. I do not consent to anyone inquiring about the mental or physical health status of my child without my presence, and I do not consent to CRT. The majority of parents in this district, the majority, do not consent to any of these things and want in-person learning, no mask.
Thank you. The next card I have, and I apologize in advance if I am not pronouncing names correctly, Michelle Aristizabal. Dr. Aristizabal? Thanks. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Michelle Aristizabal. I'm a local OBGYN, and I come tonight to implore the board to consider challenging Governor Ducey's ban of mask mandates. Those of us in the medical community unanimously feel that mask mandates are essential for ensuring our students' safety this year. We know that COVID is an airborne disease That means that hand washing, cleaning of surfaces, or any of the other sanitation strategies for controlling disease in our classrooms will not work. This has been shown in all of the districts that have thus far opened without masks in place. Over 130 students in Chandler School District are already sick with COVID after only 2 weeks of being in school. Circulating in our community, 75% of cases are the Delta variant. This is 50% more contagious than the virus we saw last year. It also affects students to a significantly, children to a significantly more significant degree. And we are seeing that in the cases. 1 in 4 new cases of COVID is in a child, and 1 in 20 hospitalizations in Arizona right now are in a child. This is serious and is something that the board needs to take into account, that this is not the same animal we were dealing with last year, and we need to protect our children. Asking us to send our children back to school without masks is driving around.
Next on the next card I have is Lisa Farr.
So first off, I'm going to say that doctor, you made a very big, gross mistake when you said that all doctors agree and they're unanimous in this. They're absolutely not. Big misrepresentation. And secondly, you are encouraging this board. What's that? Okay, then, so I'm talking to you, but I'm talking to her. Also, this doctor is sitting here asking our board and our superintendent and our administration to break the law. That is not acceptable. Your constituents demand that you follow the executive order and give us the freedom. No mask mandates will be allowed. And also, I am very concerned about the quarantining. Your duty is to provide an equal education opportunity for our children. There is no way that is possible when you're going to quarantine children for 10 days without the teacher instruction. And if you think you're going to just provide some available teacher to answer questions after school, you've got to remember most of these kids, or many of these kids, are going to be in extracurricular activities, athletics, if they're not going to be available during that time. It is your duty to make sure they have equal access to education. Please follow the executive order.
The next card I have is from Marcy Sarney.
Firstly, I sincerely thank you for making the use of masks optional and for following the law. My daughter is 13 years old and is beginning 8th grade this year. Last year, our children had to wear masks all day and were pulled in and out of in-person learning due to lockdowns and quarantines. I hope this year will be different. I have had many conversations with her about COVID, masks, vaccines, and the like, and I can tell you that the psychological effects of masks are real and terrifying. Our children's childhood is being stolen from them, and this is not okay. Trust the science. I have done my research over the past year, and there are over 47 studies confirming masks are ineffective, one of which was performed by the CDC itself and stated that 85% of those who contracted COVID-19 were wearing masks. Over 32 studies confirm the negative health effects of masks. As parents, we have the right to make health decisions for our children. This is the law. Unless shown in writing that I am prohibited from exercising that right, my child will not be wearing a mask, as it is my belief the mask is harmful to her health. COVID-19, again, has a 99.99% survival rate in children, according to peer-reviewed studies. And according to the Patient Bill of Rights, ARS 1602, number 5, the right to make healthcare decisions for the minor child, including rights pursuant to sections 15(8).
Thank you. I was just, before I get to the next card, I was just handed a note. We are working with new equipment, and we would appreciate you We may need to, but you guys don't need to speak quite so closely to the mic. Next card is from Diane Neiman.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. My name is Diane Neiman. I've lived in this area, Paradise Valley, for 24 years. 3 children have graduated from your schools. As far as the masks go, I'd like to know of the concrete evidence that serious illnesses ever occurred in the Paradise Valley district from children from COVID. And I'd like to know, after a year of the kids being separated, being in Zoom meetings, how this would help them get back into socialization with the other children if they're wearing a mask. And also, I'd like to know how this could help in the event of, let's see, their ability to express themselves and just look at other people and just really feel like they were valued. You know, I feel that this really is a separation for the children. So thank you.
The next card I have is Nicole Kludwick. Did I say that correctly?
I'm just going to keep it pretty short. I just want to ask you to please keep masks optional. I know people have talked about the efficacy and how that's questioned. I know people have talked about experts, and quite frankly, they're all over the board. People have talked about the law. I do encourage you to follow it, as I think we would want to teach our children that they should be following the law as well. I mean, it's kind of a bad example, but in addition to that, I don't want to see our state's resources going to legal bills, going to fighting, all of these things. But then on top of that, just from a very, very practical perspective, we frankly don't know the amount of learning and development that children have in nonverbal facial ways. It breaks my heart that kindergartners are not learning those cues, those social cues, those emotional cues, those developmental cues in their school from their teachers and from their peers. And it's really quite tragic that we're forcing them to not learn it. So thank you.
I have a card here from someone named Carrie who did not provide her last name.
Good evening. I'm a little ashamed to say that this is my first governing board meeting that I've attended in the last 15 years. I've had children within this district. I come here today for myself, for my first grader, for my son, who's an alumni of Horizon High School, and for the silent majority that's unable or unwilling to make it here today for one reason or another. I wanted to state that today I applaud and support the school board, along with businesses and localities that have respected our parental choice when it comes to masking our children. We anticipate and appreciate your continued support of our right to choose what is best for our children and our individual families. Simply put, I'm thankful that you respect that these are not your children. These are ours. They also have rights as Americans. It's our responsibility to take care of them, and they are our most beloved. They're not yours. If you're a parent listening to this tonight, hear me clearly. You're not alone. I urge you to connect with other parents and make your voice heard. We are strong, we're united, and we're in control. I have never and will never agree to co-parent with the government when it comes to my children. Thank you so much for your time.
The next card I have is Jennifer Baglioli. And again, I apologize if I mispronounce that.
For having us. I have 3 kids in the PV school district. I have a high school, I have a middle grade, and I have an elementary school elementary school age. I have seen this affect my kids in so many negative ways this past year. It has been awful as a parent to have no answers to give your kid when psychologically, emotionally, it is literally affecting them. They don't want to go to school. They're scared that they're going to get quarantined. If they play a sport, it affects their position if they get quarantined. My son got quarantined for 2 weeks And he had nothing. He already had COVID. They didn't care. It affected his position. It affects every kid in a different way. My youngest has fear, like he couldn't even talk to other kids. He would be so scared because he'd lost the ability to just be normal because he was not used to being around other kids every day. He became the shy introvert kid and he's not. And it breaks my heart. But we need to do what is best. And we need to listen to the law. We need to listen to our governor. We need to do what's best for our kids. And we're as parents, we should be able to make that choice. If you want to bring your kid, have your kid wear a mask, then fine. Please do. But don't tell us how to parent our kids. That's all I have to say.
The next card I have is from Kelly McCormick.
Thank you for your time. I have had 6 children come through PV School District. My last is a junior at Pinnacle, and my grandkids are now starting. I have one starting preschool. I am very grateful for the communication that we will be able to not have masks mandated. And then I've already had an experience that has made me concerned. My daughter tried out for the Spirit Line, which is literally the hugest part of her life. It gives her so much joy. She tried out on Friday, was announced the team that she made it on Saturday. We got together for a board meeting on Monday, and then Wednesday they checked out their uniforms. Yesterday we received an email that 7 girls were quarantined already. They missed team pictures, won't be in the yearbook today for the year. Tomorrow is freshman camp, and they are big mentors at freshman camp. They are not able to attend that, and they will miss the first day of school and all those other activities. My daughter's not one of these, but I'm so sad for the girls who are having to miss, who are not ill. They are not sick. I also have a friend who is a charge nurse at Phoenix Children's Hospital. She told me they have recently hired what they call Watchers, because they have up to 50 kids coming a day with suicide attempts. And these Watchers are walking the halls 24/7. When we're canceling activities, quarantining these kids, making them sit in their bedroom on a computer or whatever, they are not going to be able to deal with these things emotionally. And
The next card I have is from Barbara Jennings.
This is more for instructional purposes for the parents here, because AZ legislature passed House Bill HB 2898 and Governor Ducey signed it into law on June 30th, 2021. ARS Section 21, Title 15, Chapter 7 states the following with regards to instruction of pre-K grades in summary form. A teacher or any other employee of a school district in Arizona may not use public money for instruction that presents any form of blame or judgment on the basis of race, ethnicity, or sex. May not allow instruction in or make part of the course the concept. May not allow instruction that one race, ethnic group, or sex is inherently morally or intellectually superior to another race. May not allow instruction that an individual is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously by virtue of their race, ethnicity, or sex. May not allow instruction that an individual should be discriminated against or be adversely treated solely or partly because of that individual's race, ethnicity, or sex. May not allow instruction to an individual's moral character is determined by individual's race, ethnicity, or sex. May not allow instruction by an individual by virtue of their race, ethnic group, or sex bears responsibility for actions committed by other members of the same race, ethnic group, or sex.
Thank you. The next card is from Wendy Mahler.
Hello, I'm asking the school board today to not make any mask mandates going forward. It is the parental rights of all of us parents to make medical decisions for our children. We have the freedom of choice for our children. Also, I want to ask that the school also not discriminate when they decide if you're going to make kids quarantine who are not vaccinated, you're being discriminatory. One, you're violating our medical rights to privacy. We should have the kids should have the privacy of keeping their medical issues private. And therefore, if a child is exposed to another child that has COVID, per se, you're going to send the unvaccinated child home, but yet the vaccinated child can stay at school. That sounds like discrimination to me. Also, I would like to, Governor Ducey has signed into law that we do not have CRT, but he did speak about the very next day, he signed into law about SEL, social emotional learning, which is basically the same thing, it's just renamed. I ask that this not be instituted in our schools and that we teach freedom.
The next card I have here is Jennifer Cronin.
Just want to thank the administration and the board for respecting the rights of parents and families and employees to choose whether to wear face coverings at school, and also for complying with the state law which prohibits mask mandates. Over the past 17 months, there have been many developments regarding COVID-19. There's an incredible amount of data from all over the country and the world indicating who is most likely to suffer from a severe infection, hospitalization, or death. There are effective vaccines available to anyone aged 12 and over that wants one. And PV Schools is providing multiple learning options for families to choose from, including PV Online, PV Connect, traditional in-person learning, and the option to wear face coverings. Each family and employee can review the available information, recommendations, and studies and choose the option that best mitigates the risks of COVID-19 for their situation. 2 of my students attended back-to-school activities at their schools yesterday, Mountain Trail Middle School and Paradise Valley High School. At both schools, some students and staff were wearing masks and others were not. Students were respectful to each other and the events were very successful. There's some concern that there could be different treatment at school for those that choose to wear a face covering and those that choose to be mask-free. I hope that administration does not tolerate any discrimination towards students or employees based on their choice of whether or not to wear a face covering. Finally, excluding healthy kids from the classroom. Thank you.
Thank you. The last card I have for call to the public is Trevor Nelson.
Minute 30. All right, challenge accepted. Good evening. Arizona is currently experiencing a COVID surge because of the Delta variant. The Arizona Academy of Pediatrics reported a case amongst U.S. children jumped 84%. Sorry, that was the American Academy of Pediatrics. Arkansas is in the midst of a surge. Mississippi, Missouri, Florida, Louisiana are running out of beds. Banner Health Chief Clinical Officer Marjorie Bessel reported that there's been a 95% increase in COVID patients since July, and a 300% increase in ventilator use. The CDC recently updated their guidelines, but it's not really an update because masks in schools have always been in there. It's just that when unvaccinated children were attending, excuse me, I'm speaking. Thanks. It's not lies, actually.
Please don't
In May
interrupt the speaker.
2021, it stated if unvaccinated people attend a small indoor gathering with fully vaccinated and unvaccinated people from multiple households, they should wear a mask. That sounds like a school, because it is. There is simply no data to justify non-compliance with the Arizona Academy of Family Physicians, or American Academy of Pediatricians, CDC county health guidelines to wear masks. ARS 15-34205 that is banning the mandating of masks is not in does not apply right now because it doesn't go into effect until September 29th. It doesn't become retroactive until the date it becomes law. I ask the board to consider their stance on the law. And my time's up.
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is Superintendent's comments. Dr. Bales. The other cards we have the other cards we have up here are for specific agenda items. Those are all the cards I have for call to the public. Everything else is for specific agenda items. So if a card did not reach us, I don't have it. So I will turn it over to Dr. Bales for superintendent comments.
Thank you, President Greenberg. Happy New Year. Well, like one of my mentors taught me, it's important to start with enthusiasm. And we are starting a new year. Excuse me. A friend of mine also recently sent me a list of the worst jobs in America. Sadly, school superintendent was at the top of the list. I reminded him that I grew up on a farm, and I'm pretty sure that I can describe worse jobs than superintendent. I have the unique privilege, honor, and perspective of serving as superintendent of PV schools. And I'm excited to see the steps that our students continue to take on their journey of excellence this year. These are not easy times for school leaders, teachers, students, or parents. With distractions around nearly every decision that we make, remaining focused on our mission is sometimes difficult. We may not always agree, but we can continue to listen, learn, and lead with mutual respect and rapport. Because we can always agree that the most important piece to this equation is our students' success on their journey of excellence here in PV schools. That's what unites us. It's our partnership that will help their success. It makes us strong. Next week, our schools will begin the 21-22 school year, and I want to extend my thanks to the support staff, teachers, and administrators working to ensure our buildings and classrooms are ready for the new year. More than 3,600 employees are looking forward to welcoming nearly 30,000 students to our classrooms. To our students and parents, we're excited to welcome you with care, love, and support, regardless of the learning path you chose, in person, PV Connect, or PV Online. Our focus remains on teaching and learning, and I know our staff members are eager to get back to it. I want to extend a special warm welcome to our more than 250 new certified employees, teachers, nurses, psychologists, and such, as well as, at least as of today, 119 support staff and personnel. And thanks to Dr. Holmes and his team, busy hiring every day. I'd like to extend a shout out to Desert Financial Credit Union and that gave every new teacher a $10 gift card to Target. Later in the agenda tonight, I will highlight some priority focus areas, goals, and objectives for this year as the new superintendent. I hope you stick around and listen to that presentation as we work to stabilize and reinvigorate stakeholder relationships, rebuild trust, and improve transparency across the district. The current landscape around COVID-19 mitigation continues to change. As we watch for public health advice from our local, state, and federal officials, I want to reaffirm our commitment to maintaining a safe and healthy learning environment and workplace. We have a multi-layered approach to mitigation protocols, and it begins with everyone making a personal commitment to complete a little self-assessment every day and refrain from coming to work or school if you have COVID-like symptoms. We continue to promote healthy hand hygiene, social distancing when possible, cohorting, increased air filtration, ventilation measures, and cleaning upgrades. Our mitigation efforts continue to evolve as guidance is received. Over the past week, I've been asked to go against ARS 15-34205 regarding the prohibition of masks or vaccine mandates, a law with a retroactive clause effective July 1st. I will not knowingly break the law. My personal integrity and values will not let me make that decision. In consultation with our legal counsel, we will continue to follow the law as outlined in ARS 15-342. We have a bright and thoughtful cabinet that has discussed with me and our attorney many topics, including the effective date, retroactivity, concerns regarding immunity, insurance coverage, potential for lawsuits, funding challenges, and just plain practical considerations. While I personally believe that masks may be a tool that help reduce viral spread, and I recommend their use, you'll see me also wearing a mask indoors at our pre-K through 6th grade campuses because they have not yet had the opportunity to be vaccinated if they choose. If you're eligible for a vaccine, talk to your doctor about getting one. In the near future, we anticipate new guidance in terms of protocols regarding quarantining. In Arizona, quarantine authority is outlined in Administrative Code, Title IX, Chapter 6. It is the public health officials to quarantine. Yesterday, like fellow superintendents, I submitted a letter to the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors for clear and specific guidelines. When the county provides that new guidance, we will update our PV Schools Prepared Plan and follow it. In addition to the previously mentioned mitigation strategies, we will continue to offer a free and robust drive-through testing program Monday through Friday, 7 to 4. This provides the opportunity for students and children to return to a classroom setting much before a 10-day quarantine expires. So we're excited about offering that as we did last year. Looking forward to the new school year, we have a lot to be excited about. Not only will our students and staff continue to achieve, like the Paradise Valley High School's CREST Bioscience program that was named Outstanding Program of the Year by the Association of Career and Technical Education in Arizona. Congratulations to teachers Amanda Cherry, Michelle Landerville, and all of our outstanding CREST Bioscience students. But also our organization continues to thrive. I'm proud to announce that the district has once again received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting by the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada for our annual financial report for the fiscal year that ended June 30th, 2020. PV Schools has received this award every year since 1989, and I'd certainly like to recognize our Business Operations and Finance Department, led by Ms. Jill Berrigan, and especially Laura Felton, our former Assistant Superintendent who retired in April, for this amazing achievement. You have big shoes to fill. Continue. There are other big updates for our organization that I can't wait to share with you. Text message notifications are coming for school information and updates. We'll begin rolling this service out early this school year. Also, we're excited to announce that we will be going through the process of refreshing our websites. The scale of this refresh is too big to talk about tonight, but I wanted to let everybody know that behind the scenes, we are working hard to bring our community a new and improved online experience. Lastly, as a reminder, PV Schools is offering 3 different learning experiences for the school year, whether it's a traditional in-person option or one of 2 online options. Choosing your journey allows families to decide which learning option is right fit for their child. Our 2 online options include PV Connect, a structured online school experience through Sweetwater Community School, and PV Online, a self-paced online experience allowing students to work independently. Later, when we have a public hearing at the end of the meeting, which I'm not sure everybody will stay for, but our instructional time model will talk about a number of students that have enrolled in our district in our PV Online and PV Connect that were previously not enrolled in our district, coming from other school districts in the terms of about 50 students. So we appreciate the opportunity to recruit students and serve them. Lastly, I would like to welcome back school board members. It is a new school year and we have great things ahead of us. I look forward to working with you, our staff, our students, our families, and our entire PV Schools community to see that every student meets or exceeds their potential here in Paradise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bales. I'm throwing it right back over to you because next on our agenda are items for approval. So H1 is consideration and approval of superintendent's goals and objectives for this school year.
Outstanding. You stayed for it too. All right, Matthew, you want to put up that screen for me? This work to develop these goals and objectives, I will also provide some commentary as it relates to some strategies that support each for the 21-22 school year. Begin immediately on April 1st when the school board selected me in this position. Working with this outstanding cabinet, as well as this board through the summer, I've developed the following goals for your approval tonight. I mentioned earlier some priority focus areas, stabilize and reinvigorate our stakeholder relationships, so rebuild some trust and improve transparency in all facets, not just financial, but all facets of our community and our district operations. The first goal shouldn't be a surprise that we're focused on student achievement, and that we want to continue to focus on enhance our teaching and learning opportunities to expand student achievement through a continuous improvement and equity lens. The objectives include the following. We're going to create some new strategies to address the general academic performance. Strategies in this area include a new endeavor through the governor's office called Project Momentum. We've identified 5 schools. We'll receive some significant dollars from the governor's office to help these schools improve. North Canyon, Vista Verde, Eagle Ridge, Desert Springs Elementary, and Echo Mountain Intermediate schools are those that will participate in this endeavor, which will be a huge infusion of professional development for those teachers after a year of planning. We're also looking at providing teacher clarity. Our administrators receive initial training on their all administrative day here earlier in July to help improve instruction. And then we also have some strategies around 9th through 12th grade ACT readiness, as well as multi-tiered system of supports across the district. Basically, in educational terms, we're just trying to find as many tools on the tool belt to help kids succeed. The next objective is to review and monitor this first year of our district literacy plan. It is a 3-year plan that we will monitor and over the course of this time, implement our English language arts guaranteed and viable curriculum. We will be refining and using some screening and diagnostic tools and adding a program called Really Great Reading to our non-title schools as a Tier 2 intervention. We know our reading specialists have been asking for those kind of materials to help them reach kids that may be struggling. Finally, the third objective is to develop some additional strategies to elevate academic achievement in math and science. This year, we will continue to focus on developing 9th through 12th grade common final assessments in math. You may or may not know that some of those assessments across the district have not been the same class, different school, different exams. So we're looking at trying to develop some of those common final assessments. And also create a new integrated science course for freshmen. This is the year for our 9th through 12th grade math adoption. So we will be involving our community in that process. It's a process that will go through the entire year and then have a recommendation at the end of that for curriculum and materials late next spring. And we'll also be implementing some strategies around a common observation tool so that the principals and teachers on assignment, assistant principals who are conducting observations have a tool to all look for the same thing in mathematics, provide constructive feedback. The second goal by June of next year is to develop a process to reboot and complete our strategic plan, guiding the district for the next 5 years. The objectives include to revise the core team and the strategic planning committee makeup and those purposes for each. We'll also align our mission, our vision, our values with the strategic plan. This is long-range planning, folks. And in the end, what we hope by the 1st of March is to have developed a revised mission, vision, and value statement, as well as a portrait of a graduate with maybe 4 to 6 strategic broad goals that will guide us over the next several years. This is our journey. You know, I like to think of it right now as a journey 2030 because we need to be thinking that far out, and what we do in our decisions for resources need to align with the strategic plan. We're also going to develop some strategies to gather greater voice throughout the strategic planning process. So you will see with the help of our Marcom team, as well as Dr. Jarris, who will be a co-pilot in this project management, working with me to ensure that we have a little accordion-like experience so when this develops along the way, we can get some feedback from our community and our stakeholders. Really wasn't planning on talking this much. Goal number 3 is to improve communication with our parents and our community. We have objectives around to replace or improve our mass communication system by adding texting capability. You heard me mention that earlier. We're going to reimagine our website and social media platforms to simplify and improve the end user experience. You may have saw even today the very first back to school edition with a new look to that edition that came out today, as well as the website will be a process that's already included many stakeholders. We have some focus groups developing over the next month and a lot of work behind the scenes, but this was a project that hopefully will be complete by the 1st of January. We're going to develop some strategies to communicate on all curriculum standards and materials for public review. Dr. Corson and I are committed to making sure that all of our materials become easily accessible on our website as a resource for parents to view at any time. We're going to enhance the customer service experience for internal and external stakeholders. Dr. Holmes and Ms. Berrigan are going to work carefully together on a customer service experience, developing scripts for phone and in-person experiences, as well as the district department support. So we're excited to have those two working with the Marcom department to develop some customer service experiences and improve that for all of our clientele. Finally, we're going to increase some opportunities for greater student and parent feedback. We're going to re-implement our parent satisfaction survey, which has generally been administered in the early spring. We're also going to develop a cabinet survey for our administrators to provide feedback to our leadership. We're going to discuss with our Student Leadership Council about gathering student feedback. And we got some other great ideas that Mr. Droege has outlined in his goals as our Director of Marketing and Communications. And finally, we want to continue adherence to principles of fiscal responsibility and improve our stakeholders' understanding of the district's revenues and expenditures. We are a large organization with more than $500 million worth of budgets, and we are one of the most regulated states in the country when it comes to those pots. We want to make sure that we're doing our best to explain where the money comes from and how it's being used and expended. So we are developing some strategies to do that this year that may include information on the website, as well as developing a new popular annual report beyond our comprehensive, and then developing some small chunks of information shared through multimedia platforms as webinars or town halls. So we're looking at finding some ways to help inform our stakeholders. Next, we're going to develop some strategies to enhance our board and community understanding of the budgetary matters. We're going to develop some clear and easy understandable presentations at board meetings. I hope that you see that in both tonight and future meetings. We're going to post our minutes clearly, share updates for state budget matters, and weekly updates and Q&As for our board members. I try to be upfront and honest with everything. I will be, and sharing all what I can with them. Last but not least, we're going to develop a 3 to 4 year facilities plan with a lens toward 10 years. We need to be looking way beyond just the 3 to 4 years. We know we go to our voters at different times for support on bond elections, and they need to know what the long-term vision is for the plans that we may or may not have for our facilities. And those are my goals and objectives with some commentary about some strategies. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I do request approval.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bales. Does anybody have any comments or questions for Dr. Bales?
I do. I want to thank you for so holistically capturing the interests of what we discussed as a board and me as an individual that I have received from stakeholders in my time in PV. And I personally am excited about all of the goals, and I really feel good about you and our cabinet and our board working together to, and the rest of our employees, honestly, to come together and help make these happen. I really think that they're all important, and I really do appreciate them. So,
thank you.
Mrs. Case?
Thank you. I just want to say, as I've looked at these goals and thought about them, and as we spoke about them in June, I just appreciate the overall feeling of these goals that our constituents, our students, our parents, our teachers are all included. And I appreciate the thoughtfulness that's gone into these goals. And I appreciate also that the first goal is student achievement. But all of these are wonderful, and I thank you.
Mrs. Bacon?
Dr. Bales, I'd also like to thank you for putting this together and so accurately reflecting the conversations that we've been having, in particular at our June retreat. The other thing I'm really appreciative of is that you sit and you show this to the community. You tell them what you're accountable for, and you give us the tools to hold you accountable. And that's incredibly important and not done everywhere. So I want to thank you for that. That is something that I'm very proud of. And as I talk to other board members in other parts of the state or even locally, that's not always done. And they feel envious that we have a situation and we have an agreement that this is something that we're doing, because it is important for the community to understand how the board holds you accountable. So thank you so much for everything that you've done.
I wanted to point out there's a lot of things in here that you're talking about, not only what it means for right now, but how this is impacting for the future, and always an eye for what's coming down the road. And I appreciate that in the superintendent, that's always the focus is dealing with the here and now, but also with an eye towards where we want to be going. So thank you.
And I will add my thanks. Having sat on the board and done this annually with different superintendents, I really appreciate how thorough this is, and as everyone said, how collaborative this is. And again, we've heard bits and pieces, we've seen some of this, but the details you provided tonight are extraordinarily exciting. I mean, I'm really captivated by some of the programs and other opportunities that are inherent in your goals and focus areas. So again, thank you. And I will, echo what Mrs. Bacon said. I know that the process we have here and the transparency and openness we have here is not replicated in many districts around the Maricopa County and around the state. And thank you for joining with us to be that open. And with that, Mrs. Brown, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And we have goals and objectives. Next on the agenda is the draft 2022 political agenda from the Arizona School Boards Association. When they sent this to all school boards, they asked that we put this on an agenda prior to the delegate assembly on September 11. I hope everybody up here has had a chance to review it. In the cover note, John Sparks, who's legislative committee chair this year, noted that the committee reviewed and discussed every submitted proposal during its meetings. Most boards indicated support for items included in the 2021 political agenda. And what the committee and the staff has decided to do is present the proposed political agenda as a marked up version of the 2021 agenda. And this will allow us during the delegate assembly to focus on the changes as opposed to go through every item in the agenda. And as somebody who has chaired this committee and served as a delegate, that is an excellent innovation. So I just kind of want to throw it open to see if anyone on the board has any thoughts or comments on the proposed changes that the Ledge Committee made.
I do.
Mrs. Brown?
Okay, so I did read through them. I like many of the edits, and I'm supportive in general of what most is said on the second page of the report. Close near the bottom, there is a part that is in red that says replacement of buildings that have exceeded their useful life and advocating for the capacity standards that reflect the design of, instructional space. I actually should read it from the beginning. The bullet reads, provide funding for new space before existing schools exceed their minimum or their maximum capacity and become overcrowded, and provide dedicated and flexible ongoing maintenance funding, including replacement of buildings that have exceeded their useful life. Advocate for capacity standards that reflect the design of instructional space. And for whatever reason, this is a hot topic for me. I'm particularly grateful that this is specified in here, and that the specificity, because it said building replacement before, but I appreciate that. So I generally in favor, but that one I'm particularly in favor of. On the next page, there's a bullet that was added that I am more confused about than giving as much support. The addition, give all districts the authority to provide affordable housing options to teachers, is something I've literally never heard of. And so I'm curious as to what that's about. Anyone?
Well, you may have more of the official information, but there are districts throughout the state, particularly in rural areas, that to attract teachers have either built housing or entered into agreements to be able to provide affordable housing.
That is correct. And it is something that is a topic for even, Valley school districts, not necessarily rural Arizona districts only, but Valley school districts. This is a particularly expensive area to live in, and on a, $42,000 to $47,000 starting salary as a teacher, even a dual income, they can't afford to buy a home in our attendance area. We have 100 square miles, but it's very difficult to try to do that. So affordable housing is certainly an issue, and it's becoming a part of recruitment and retention conversations at districts nationwide, really.
Okay, thank you. I have one additional comment that is it's the last of the redlined pages. There aren't page numbers on here, but it's like the third to the last page. And it is the bullet at the top. It says, oppose any measure that would result in fewer qualified voters from being easily able to vote or registered to vote. I personally believe that qualified voters should be able to easily vote and register to vote. And so I see why there would be an opposition to that measure, but I'm not exactly sure what ASBA has to do and with that in particular, and not because I don't see a little bit of correlation, but I worry that the focus of what our legislative agenda, as an ASBA school district would potentially be, there are so many things on this list. I just want to make sure that we have the most important things as it relates to education. And so the opposition of that, how much time could that take away from other things?
I don't know that it's taking time away. I think the way, and Julie might jump into on this, I don't know, but the way the government relations staff looks at this is that it provides direction. So it's not that staff is going to necessarily go out and do something with this, but if it comes up in a legislative session, it provides staff direction in terms of how ASBA would approach that type of legislation. Does that help? So it's not really adding.
Help. Yeah. I mean, it is adding because there's already a list of things that would be here, and then that's additional. Now, I'm not saying I oppose the idea of it. I'm only just concerned that because education is so incredibly encumbered with so many things that we have to be paying attention to, that taking on any additional things that could be related, it may take away from our efficacy in the other measures. That's my only concern. And so I thought maybe if there was a specific reason that this came up as it related to education, or if there, but it sounds like maybe there wasn't a specific thing that you're aware of.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't on the committee. I wasn't in the meeting.
Of all of this, that is one that I wouldn't necessarily support, not because I don't support the idea of voters being able to vote, but because I want to make sure that we are focusing on specific education items that we can make a difference in more directly, even though I do see how this could be applied to education. That's all.
I mean, they put it under require public accountability for taxpayer dollars spent on education is the overall
Right, yeah, I
heading.
read that.
So I'm
It's
I'm
kind
just
of a-
gonna
yeah.
guess that the conversation might have been because the one objection I have is that they didn't add their rationales back in.
I
mean,
know, I thought that too.
We used to get that, and I thought that was excellent, so we knew
That
what
would
the
be
thinking
helpful.
was. So obviously, this would be a great place for have it. So I would conjecture that it might be just the thought that ensuring that voters can vote expands that accountability measure to as many people as possible.
So
That
we
would
are
be my guess.
approving that we support these changes. That would be what we would be approving tonight, or not approving tonight would be the way it reads here. And so if I were to approve it, I would want that feedback that I gave to make it back to the committee that, that runs this.
I mean, I would say, I mean, depending on how we would make a motion, if the rest of the board agrees that feedback should go back and we approve either support or whatever, because
I also like
we're-
the idea that they would give their reasoning, if possible, in the future. I know that's not going to happen this year, but like for the next years.
Well, I mean, we've got more than a month before the delegate assembly. I mean, it's certainly feedback we can give the government relations folks and see if we can get that information beforehand.
Okay.
So
that's all my comments.
And Mrs. Greenberg, I think it's worth noting that we're talking about this and we send a representative to the meeting where they share our feedback with the rest of the school districts from across Arizona. And then all of the school districts in Arizona will discuss this document. They'll approve or not approve. They'll amend and modify. So, the conversation that we're having, hopefully there's lots of other school districts having it. And it is really a compilation of all school district boards' feedback. So that's good. And I think it's good for us to, we can approve it as discussed, with the concerns as discussed. And that gives Mrs. Greenberg and Mrs. Matura the opportunity to go and share those things on the day of the assembly for this approval.
does anybody else have any other thoughts, comments? Then can we have a motion?
So moved. Are we making a motion to approve as discussed? Is that what we?
Oh, I am sorry, you did.
We're going to hear.
Okay, before we make a motion. Thank you, Trevor. My apologies, I put him over here. Yes, so Trevor Nelson submitted a card to speak to this. Thank you, I apologize. Since there is only one person, I think we can make it up to 3 minutes.
Oh, thank you. 3 minutes 30. Nice. I won't need it all, but you guys had such a great discussion going. I understand why I'm not offended at all. I just want to say I appreciate the Arizona School Board Association and this governing board and your involvement in ASBA. I think it's a great organization. They do good work advocating for public education, and that's really great. What's disconcerting is the removal of the section, I believe it's page 4, but you're right, Board Member Brown, it's not numbered. It's this huge one that's all red, where they removed manage the impact of COVID on public schools. Some people may or may not be aware that the pandemic isn't over just because we're over it. In Maricopa County, there have been 18 active outbreaks in schools. In the last 24 hours, 6 schools were added to the dashboard. So yesterday there were 12, today there's 18. San Carlos Unified canceled in-person pre-K to 2nd grade. Hamilton, as of yesterday, and Chandler had 32 active cases. And at Desert Vista and Tucson, 105 football players, their season's been impacted because 6 players tested positive and 16 are in quarantine waiting for testing. In Arizona, as it stands this morning, the Arizona youth aged 12 to 17, only 23.5% have been vaccinated. And overall, only 49.4% of eligible population has been vaccinated. So we've got a ways to go. What I'm asking, I could keep going, but what I'm asking for is the governing board to consider a request into ASBA to reconsider that position. I noticed some of these have 2020, 2021 school year in them. They probably need to be amended. It doesn't make sense to be in there. It's not 2020 anymore. But what I think you guys should advocate for is for public schools to be given the tools to be better prepared for this ongoing pandemic and even for the next one coming in the future if there is one. You guys need the tools to put this in place. For instance, one thing I might suggest, and Superintendent Bales, you might get this from the county health when kids go on quarantine. What I heard tonight, that was really depressing, that mom said that her kid was out for 10 whole days. My daughter was exposed. She went and got tested and was able to come back into the classroom before the 10 days. So there might need to be some education and some clearance so that that can happen. And if that's what the county comes up with, that would be great, because that is a tool that's used, that's in the toolbook, the toolkit of the CDC and others, so that they can get retested to come back if it's a PCR test. So that's it. That's all I have to say. I've got like 30 seconds left. I don't need it, but just ask them to reconsider that position so that they can advocate for you guys to have the tools you need to be better prepared for the rest of this pandemic as it finishes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there, my assumption that the reason why this was eliminated, this section was eliminated, was because most of the specifics of it were enacted and could be continued from schools, for school districts as they see fit in the future. So, things like provide flexibility in seat time and attendance requirement for school districts, et cetera. Now, there's a law, isn't there, that has limited that sort of narrative?
Yes, there are a number of provisions in the adopted state budget that address some of these issues.
Okay, all right. And then some of these things were addressed, like I think there was, wait a minute, technology monetization and accessibility to ensure students. Much of that has already been accomplished, I would imagine. And then I think that that's addressed in a different section. So that is why I did not have an issue with this being eliminated, just as, but I wasn't in the committee, so I don't know what the discussion was as to how they came to that decision.
And I'm not actually seeing that they have taken much of what was in this section and inserted it elsewhere, but so if there's something specific that you saw.
Yeah, I'll just mention the first 3 bullets, for example, have been addressed, with legislative action. So a lot of this has already been addressed.
Well, like, I think the fifth bullet, it says provide districts flexibility in teacher evaluation requirements and procedures. Don't we have some flexibility in teacher evaluation requirements? And
We did have that granted to us here late in the legislative session. It was like May or was it April? I mean, it was after we
Okay,
actually
so-
had all of ours completed, to be honest, is when they released
okay.
that reprieve.
Um,
And that came from ADE.
Yeah, I don't know if the state-funded program designed to bulk purchase sanitation supplies for distribution is something that is ongoing or not.
Yeah, the county has a lot of the PPE available. Districts can order it online and get it delivered, so.
In another part, that was already, it's not in red, it wasn't added, it was already in the political agenda. On a page where there's a red line at the top, it says receive adequate funding for the actual cost of their services. There's a bullet below that says provide funding to individual districts to implement locally directed school safety programs as well as student mental health and well-being initiatives. And when you look at the bullet that is under managing COVID, that one of the things is social and emotional needs of students, which would fall under that other bullet in that other section that is already in existence. So those are some of the things that I am referring to, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through each one of them, but I just was making a comment on why I felt comfortable with that part being eliminated.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Brown. Anybody else have any other Mrs. Case?
I'm looking at improve the outcome for all students, and it says increase the compulsory attendance age from 16 to 18 years or the attainment of a high school diploma, a GED. I remember in years past where the Indian nations particularly have wanted this to pass and other people did not have it pass. I had the opportunity a week ago to be on the Indian nation looking at the beauties there, and I spoke to a teacher and I talked to her about this issue, and I hope that this is voted in to change that it's changed from 16 to 18 or the attainment of a high school diploma or GED. I hope that passes this time because that has been a problem in the Indian nations and perhaps some other cultures. They turn 16 and the state law says 16 and you don't have to continue on in school. And I would hope that kids are encouraged to continue till they get their GED diploma or turn 18. So I hope
Which
that
unfortunately
passes.
is why this has been in here for
It has been in here
several
many,
years.
many
Yeah.
times, but I just had a personal experience and I've always wanted it to pass, but now I want it to pass even more. So
Thank you for that feedback. Does anybody else have any other thoughts, questions? So Mrs. Brown, may we have a motion to?
I move to approve as discussed, and that President Greenberg and Board Member Ventura will bring back the feedback, and that's it.
Thank you very much. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next on the agenda is consideration and approval of revisions to policy BEDB, and I will turn it over to Dr. Bales.
President Greenberg, governing board members, cabinet guests, revisions to this policy regarding the public agenda is a revision to eliminate the subjective part of a 5-minute for a spokesperson of a recognized representative authorized organization. This revision eliminates the subjectivity to identify such speaker and just keeps it consistent with 3 minutes for every speaker, maintaining the governing board's right to limit the number of individuals with a specific time, depending on the volume of speakers. We recommend approval.
Thank you very much. We have 2 cards. 2 individuals wish to speak to H3. First, Nicole Klutwick. And since we only have 2, if you need the full 3 minutes, you've got it.
I probably don't need the whole 3 minutes. Yeah, last time was my first board meeting, and now look at me, I'm here like every time,
Expert.
saying something. So I didn't even know this was a thing on the board meeting, but as I was preparing, thinking about masks, thinking about curriculum, I came across this, and this actually concerns me more than the other 2 things. The language here is extremely, extremely vague for anybody who doesn't know what the language is. They're adding the words, the governing board reserves the right to limit the number of individuals limited to comment on a specific item or modify the time permitted for each speaker. While I absolutely understand pragmatically why that is at times necessary, I always like to think ahead and what things might look like, even when you guys aren't the ones who are sitting here. Who might be sitting here? What might they have planned? The language is so vague that it effectively can censor public speech altogether, right? I mean, we could just say, we're so busy, we just have time for 1 or 2 people. We're so busy, everybody just gets 30 seconds, which is not enough time to articulate what you really have to say, what your concerns really are. I do understand where you're going with this, but I would like you guys not to approve it, just given how extremely vague it is. It could be anything, right? I mean, you could limit it to anything. So just in order to protect the public and parents' ability to be able to let you know our thoughts, I think it's really important, and especially as we see other areas of government and interactions between government and corporations censoring speech, I think, and you're wanting to be very transparent, I think this is probably not the right thing at the right time. So thank you.
We also have a card from Trevor Nelson.
I understand the nuanced position involved in this decision of limiting speech at these meetings. I've been at these meetings where there's been lots of people talking, but if you notice tonight, it's a pretty relative small amount of people actually speaking. 3 minutes probably would have been fine. There's also a delicate balance with First Amendment in our Constitution. I do not always like or agree with what is said at this microphone, but I will always stand up for their right to say it, no matter how silly or off topic or ridiculous or rude their speech is. The governing board can claim time limits or excuses, like was mentioned, so I won't reiterate that. But keep in mind, these are often the first or last attempt to get a matter resolved when someone comes up and speaks. Given the board norms that are going to be adopted later, and will no doubt be agreed upon, quote, often the board was, let me read it actually, says, refer to the superintendent complaints problems or issues from parents, community members, and staff to seek positive solutions before airing matters publicly. Well, often there's no positive solution, and the matter needs to be publicly aired. When my youngest daughter was in kindergarten, her teacher was taken away from her 2 weeks into the school year. There was no positive solution. Her teacher wasn't put back at our school, and the public deserves to know that failure in order to ensure that that mistake is never made again. So I respectfully request the governing board seek to not limit speech as outlined in H3. I understand the removal of the 5 minutes for the spokesperson representing an organization, but that should also be allowed as well. So this should not be voted in the affirmative, should stay the way it is. And there might also need to be a mention of email submissions, because I don't know if that's in the agenda or not, but it's a great policy to have. So please consider not changing this and not limiting our free speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all the cards we had on this. Mrs. Brown, may we have a motion, and then I will open it up for discussion.
So I do the motion before we discuss? Is that, or do we discuss first?
We can discuss the motion, unless anybody has something they would like to discuss before the motion.
Well, I'd like to address some concerns. Can I do that, or do I do that after the motion?
We typically have done it after the motion,
Oh, okay.
but you can do it before the motion as well.
I
it's not
move
gonna
to approve,
absolutely change anything.
but I would like to discuss. Okay, okay. So I'm not sure that it's clear as to our audience as to why we're asking to do this. First, the 5-minute the 5-minute that exists now for an organization is so difficult to determine what would an organization would be. So you may determine that you are the leader of an organization of 10 people that just was created in the parking lot and may advocate for 5 minutes. This eliminates us from having to argue with everyone who believes that they have an organization that exists that may not, we don't know how would we determine that. This was a large discussion. We asked multiple people. Additionally, it's my understanding that there's no law that requires that we have any public comment. So we're not required we could eliminate public comment altogether. This board, before I was on it, and this school district has been unusually impressive in their accepting public comment and accommodating it as much as possible. The time limit that is written that, it may have to be modified or reduced is so that everyone gets an opportunity that wants to speak, and that our employees and we are not here until 2 in the morning if it happens to be a hot topic. Additionally, people have the opportunity to send us emails that we do read and that do affect our decisions. And people have oftentimes the opportunity to do online input forms so that we, separate from if they don't even know our email, it's in the board, information. So it's in 2 different places that they have access to give us feedback. So in no way, shape, or form are we looking to limit feedback from our constituency, from our parents, from our students, from our teachers. We've always embraced that. And then the other thing that I would say is that one of the comments that I made when we were discussing this is that commercials have a maximum time amount that they're trying to get a message across. It can be done in a limited amount of time, less than 5 minutes for sure, less than 3 minutes for sure. And so it's just, yes, emotions get involved and it goes on longer, but my personal feeling is that if you stick to the message you're trying to get, even 90 seconds is more than enough. So, but I also am adamant that we have public comment and I want to hear from you. So we're not trying to limit free speech. That's my feedback.
Thank you. Mrs. Machura?
I also wanted to mention that a reason for putting it in writing here is just so that it's not a surprise that people would be aware that things might change depending on, if you had 300 people here to speak about one topic, that there may be things that change. And this happens with all school boards do it, but if it's explained ahead of time and people are aware that it might be an option, it was just a way to, I felt it was a way to explain things ahead of time so people were more aware going in.
Mrs. Case?
Recently, I was listening to some of the discussions going on around the nations, and someone brought up the fact that there's a Supreme Court case that came forward that said you could not limit the ability for the public to speak about their schools. And I think it was in 64, 63. I have to go look it up again. But that is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it so we're not here all night and I understand when you said it was vague, I get what you're saying there. how vague it is. And so perhaps it could say instead, when there's going to be hundreds commenting, it might be advantageous to limit 90 seconds instead of 3. You're asking for some clarification on that. So it could say perhaps if there are extreme numbers of people choosing to speak, then we might change it from 3 minutes to 90 minutes according to a large crowd. And that would be fine with me.
Well, first, policies can be updated by any board anytime. So if we're not here, a policy could be updated in the future to say anything, including eliminating it. But I'm not necessarily supportive of adding more detailed, because sometimes how long our board meetings go are not determined by how many people are making public comment. It's determined by what's on the agenda. So we don't necessarily, sometimes business has to be done for the better for kids, so that we're educating kids. And if there's so many things on the agenda, it may not be 20 people, it may not be 100 people, it may be 5 people. So I wouldn't necessarily support that either, although I do understand worrying about, vague language, but this same vague language has been in here for a long time. I mean, it's fairly vague to begin with.
President Greenberg, Mrs. Brown, the companion policy, which is the next item, is similar, almost exactly to this. It addresses the public participation. And I know I'm a little ahead of the schedule, but I just mentioned that in that companion policy, the existing language was time constraints may limit the number of individuals invited to comment on a specific item. So it was also intentional to make it consistent in both policies. That's why it was reworded the way it was, but it was always there. They've always had that opportunity as a board to limit. And so it was just to make it clear and applicable in both policies. And also then the historical piece on the representative organization has been an organization that typically the board president would make the decision if they are a group that has an official capacity, like a tax ID, or they have elections and representatives, to know that that person has been elected to speak in that organization. So that's how it's been limited to that group. That's been the definition up to this point. And that was concerning to people, those would be the only groups that could speak. So just by making it consistent was in an effort to be fair.
Mrs. Matura?
I also, as opposed to trying to be boxed into a specific total amount or the number of speakers, during our discussion, we came up with some scenarios where we wouldn't want to put limits, where sometimes the entire board meeting is for the purpose of hearing public feedback. For instance, if there's a school adjustment, a school closing, or something like that. And so in circumstances like that, there have been more board meetings where the board has been willing and said, we will sit here all night and hear every single person, because that's what we will do today. And so boxing it in with specifics kind of limits you on both sides. And so so I remember that being a discussion of why we weren't putting in specifics to that language, was that it gave us the ability to just, not box ourselves in if we have a situation like that.
Any other board member comments?
Are there any other board member comments? Are there any other board member comments? If not, the motion has been made. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next on the agenda is H4, and Dr. Bales already sort of previewed it, but I will turn it over to Dr. Bales.
Yeah, the only addition to this policy is a recommendation from ASBA regarding presentations from unsolicited services that would not be permitted. These are companies or businesses offering services of possible interest and informing them that presentation or unsolicited service should be sent to the district office for distribution versus the dais.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bales. We have one comment card here as well. Trevor Nelson.
You're not going to limit my time. I'm kidding. That's a bad joke. I gave my previous comments about limiting speech, blah, blah, blah. What I will say is that the open meeting agenda is based on, in Arizona, there's an Attorney General opinion, I-99006, that says that they should have call to the public. But then there's Attorney General opinion I-78001 that says you don't necessarily have to have one. So to your point, Member Brown, it's not clear. And the Supreme Court has not ruled yet on what is said. That being said, I do support D, or the inclusion of D about presentations of unsolicited. There's ways to present to the district. And this is not one of them. This is a governing board meeting. So just to stay on course with what's here and to provide more time, as you guys said, to deliberate your items and also allow for even perhaps more public comment, that should be added. So I don't have a problem with that. There's proper channels for people to get involved in the district, and I've been lucky to be involved in those as a parent volunteer. I actually encourage everyone to try and volunteer when the district comes calling. It's very rewarding, and working with members of the cabinet and the PV staff and the teachers, we found real solutions to problems that we mutually agreed upon, and it was a great process. I highly encourage you to do that, but no, unsolicited services should not be up here because it's unsolicited. If you guys wanted to talk to them, you'd invite them. So thank you. That's all I have to say. That was pretty quick.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Brown, may I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next on the agenda is consideration and approval of board norms. As we have done annually for several years now, the board reviewed the norms that we had approved previously at our board retreat. We made some slight adjustments. I will ask Mrs. Brown for a motion to approve those norms and then throw it up.
So moved.
Is there any discussion? Ms. Case? Yep. Nope. Anyone? Nope. Yep. Ms. Matura?
I just really appreciate that we have the board norms, and I appreciate that we look at them every year, especially when we have new members joining. It's something that's out there, so I think it's an important document, and I'm glad that we do it.
Sorry. Thank you very much. There's no other discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next on the agenda is consideration and approval of an agreement between the district and others regarding litigation. I will turn it over to Dr. Bales.
President Greenberg and governing board members, as directed from our executive session of June 24th, I present the agreement for litigation against Jewel for your approval.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Brown, may we have a motion?
Do we want to explain more of what the litigation is? Or
If you have questions, I mean, it's in the backup material and on the public agenda.
I move that we approve.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? And I will note that our attorney is here if we have any legal questions. Nope. Seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next on the agenda is H7, consideration approval of recommended K-8 social studies curriculum resource adoption, second reading. Dr. Bales.
Thank you, President Greenberg. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Corson and Ms. Hoppes.
Good evening, President Greenberg, members of the board, Dr. Bales, cabinet and guests. Lynn Hoppus, our social studies curriculum specialist, and I will present to you a second reading of the K-8 Social Studies Curriculum Resource Adoption Committee's recommendations. This presentation follows our first reading from April 22nd. I'd like to remind the governing board of the 20 members who served on this committee, comprising of teachers, administrators, and parents, representing 18 different schools. These members were selected to be on this committee by the representative stakeholder groups of the Paradise Valley Education Association, Principal and Vice Principal Association, and the United Parent Council, a process consistent with committee formation in the district. I want to thank these members for their many hours this school year contributing to this process and for their professionalism and commitment to our PV students, staff, and community. Lynn?
As you may recall, the committee began its work last October and participated in a series of meetings that included identifying potential curriculum resources, reviewing vendor proposals, viewing presentations from the vendors about the resources, analyzing the materials. Oh, okay, sorry. Do I have to start at the beginning? No. Okay, good. Viewing presentations from the vendors about the resources, analyzing the materials, considering stakeholder feedback, and using materials in their classroom. As a result of this process, the committee arrived at consensus and presented its recommendations to the governing board on April 22nd. Following the presentation, some community members expressed concern that they were unaware of the adoption process and opportunity to view the materials. Community members also had questions about the content with the materials. In value of these interests and concern, we reopened the public viewing of the curriculum between June 7th through July 9th of both hard copy and online materials. We also provided both a hard copy and online forms for feedback. The committee members were provided all community feedback and reviewed that feedback independently. We can reconvene the committee on July 15th for the purpose of reviewing the community input and making recommendations to the superintendent's cabinet on next steps. There were 57 responses provided, 54 of them online and 3 in hard copy form. We collected information, including the person's email address if they agreed to leave it, and their primary role. From this question, 2 identified themselves as teachers, 52 as parents, and all hard copy responses were from community members. The committee and the PV leadership team appreciates and values the time, effort, and interest that these individuals took to review materials and offer their input. The community feedback included 3 questions. The first was soliciting input into the alignment of resources with state standards. The second question elicited input regarding the resources application of inquiry-based approaches. Both of these were important to the committee's consideration. The third question was open-ended and allowed for any input. As mentioned in our timeline, committee members read all feedback provided during the second viewing opportunity and met on July 15th to review, discuss, and make recommendations about next steps.
In the committee meeting, members first reviewed the context in which this adoption was taking place. Impacting the need for an adoption was new standards Arizona adopted in 2018 and being implemented last school year. These standards shifted content to different grade levels and embedded an inquiry-based approach to studying social studies that involved engaging students in overarching essential questions, studying multiple perspectives about issues and events, encouraging students to draw conclusions from various resources, and connecting historical events to current situations. PV School's last K-8 social studies adoption was 2005, and the resources no longer were mapping effectively to these new standards. Also impacting this adoption was a recent announcement by the Arizona Department of Education. ADE has partnered with Discovery Education and is under contract with them to provide Discovery Education's experience platform to all K-12 students in Arizona to support schools in implementing the new standards. You may recall the Discovery Education's Textbook platform, considered a primary and more robust resource from Discovery Education, has and is being recommended as part of the adoption. Finally, the committee also acknowledged the discourse, concerns, and questions that have been raised regarding such topics as critical race theory, the teaching of controversial topics, and ARS 15-717.02, which prohibits instruction that presents blame or judgment on the basis of race, ethnicity, or sex. In reading the community feedback, the committee took particular note of trends in the feedback and the frequency of feedback directly aligned with a particular resource. The committee also examined specific examples provided in the feedback and compared those comments with the mentioned resource to understand the community members' perspectives. From the feedback analysis, the committee summarized the predominant trends into questions about process and content that they then discussed in considering in determining next steps. First, the committee considered whether stakeholders were unaware of the adoption, thus limiting the voices represented. The committee acknowledged that it was a tough year for everyone involved and that there could be individuals who were unaware of the adoption. The committee was confident, however, that the additional opportunity for feedback in June from the community, along with the feedback they had previously received from teachers and administrators, that the committee had a good cross-section of input to be confident in their recommendations. Similarly, the committee discussed whether the distraction of COVID-19 prevented a thorough review of the materials, thus not having adequate input to consider. The committee acknowledged that there could be individuals who did not have as much familiarity with the resources. The committee confirmed that with the additional opportunity for feedback this summer, along with feedback that they had previously received, that it had enough input to be confident in their analysis. The committee also considered questions that challenged their own participation in the process and whether their membership represented the diversified voices of the stakeholders they represented. Committee members rejected the notion that they had not thoroughly reviewed the materials themselves, and I can attest to the many hours this committee spent in whole group and small group meetings analyzing these materials. In addressing the next question regarding committee configuration and its representation of diversified voices of the larger stakeholder groups, these committee members explained that they volunteered to serve on this committee as representatives of their stakeholder group. PVEA, PVP, and UPC leadership selected these members with consideration of representing a cross-section of grade levels and schools. Finally, the committee also considered questions specifically regarding the content of the resources. They reviewed concerns about the age appropriateness of content, whether resources contained elements of bias or critical race theory, or presented misinformation about historical events. Committee members considered these perspectives from examples that were provided in the input and discussed the examples from multiple points of view. While committee members themselves did not believe that the resources in whole were age inappropriate, biased, or misleading, the committee members acknowledged community members' perspectives and used those perspectives to inform their recommendations. While the committee's last meeting was focused exclusively on recent process and content concerns with the resources, the committee had considered other evaluation criteria which led to their initial recommendations. The committee is confident that the resources it is recommending today meets with all of these previously considered criteria. There is clear alignment with the standards. There are print and online resources available. The resources differentiate effectively for various student needs. They support the district's commitment to support all students through an equity lens, and they offer quality professional development for our staff. As a result of this process, the committee is in consensus of two changes from its original recommendation. First, the committee is removing its recommendation of Nuzella from adoption consideration. This recommendation results from the committee's consideration of the community's feedback and perspectives provided in June. Second, the committee recommends the DBQ document-based question project be removed from consideration at grades 4 and 5 in response to the perspective that this resource might better serve middle grades.
In summary, the committee is recommending McGraw-Hill and Studies Weekly for grades K2. The committee believes these resources for K2 and McGraw-Hill Impact is student-centered, comprehensive, with a coherent knowledge-building program that promotes students' understanding of the world and their individual place in it. Through the engaging inquiry-based learning opportunities, students discover how to think historically, civically, spatially, and economically. This resource also supports our DLI Spanish program. Studies Weekly is for K-5. It is a standards-aligned weekly resource that introduces and scaffolds students' experiences with the skills of inquiry, creating their own inquiries, examining and analyzing evidence, communicating conclusions, and taking action. This resource also supports our DLI Spanish program. In grades 3 through 4, the committee affirms its recommendation for Splash and Studies Weekly. Splash is a resource that uses the inquiry approach to provide our 3rd and 4th grade students hands-on activities in addition to creative, expository, and persuasive writing opportunities. In grade 5, the committee recommends Discovery Education and Studies Weekly. You may recall that we mentioned that Discovery Education's Experience platform has now been purchased and endorsed by ADE for all K-12 students. Discovery Experience is primarily a supplemental resource. The committee is recommending Discovery Education's Tech Book platform as is a full curriculum resource. The state's partnership with Discovery Education was a strong consideration for the committee and its recommendation. In grades 6 through 8, the committee is recommending Discovery Education's Tech Book and the DBQ project. While the committee removed DBQ from grades 4 and 5, the committee believed that DBQ is an important resource to use with intermediate and high school grades. The DBQ project is a standards-aligned document-based program that helps students develop rigorous critical thinking and evidence-based writing skills in the social sciences and literature. Through the in-depth lessons, students read, analyze, find evidence, defend their findings, and publish their conclusions. These life skills are necessary for all college and career citizens. This resource also supports our DLI Spanish program.
While not directly recommendations from the committee, our curriculum team is committed to several next steps. First, we'll continue reviewing and considering ongoing feedback regarding social studies content to guide the implementation of social studies standards and the use of these resources. This feedback will also serve to inform professional development and align specific resource content to our curricular guides. Lynn Hoppus, our social studies curriculum specialist here tonight, will be our point of contact in collecting and reviewing this feedback. We'll also work closely with the marketing and communications team to deploy more effective communication about adoption processes, including communications sent to the public, systems for committee members to report out to their stakeholder groups, and better placement of information on the district's website. We'll also continue to work with ADE, other districts, and our stakeholder groups to identify additional or alternate resources that support our classrooms. As we implement our 7-year adoption, we also reserve the option to adopt different materials before the end of the 7-year cycle if we believe there are other materials that would better serve our students, teachers, and community. In addition, we recognize that the 2018 changes in standards represent significant shifts to what is taught in social studies and how it is taught. We want to work with our community to share those shifts to build awareness of the challenges and opportunities we face in aligning to these new standards. And we already have professional development being created to help teachers understand the new legislation on prohibited instruction, especially as it applies to the teaching of social studies and history. Now, before we transition to discussion and questions, I'd like to provide Dr. Bales with an opportunity to share some final thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Corson. First, I'd like to express my thanks also to the committee members and particularly community members that provided additional input this summer. All of those people gave up enormous amounts of time and energy, and I want to say thank you. This volume of materials is why teachers take the first year of any adoption to scan all the materials and select those that help them meet their learning objectives. While many people want to erase 2020 from our memory, we cannot. However, we can learn from the challenges and move forward. And I especially want to thank Dr. Corson and Lynn Hoppus for your leadership in this area. I know it's challenging with the changes in leadership and an extended opportunity, but I appreciate your patience with us. I also want to reiterate some of the commitments covered in the presentation that I think are worth mentioning clearly. The materials recommended tonight do not teach or support critical race theory. We will continue to collect information from our stakeholders this year, and Lynn is that person that will take those concerns and organize an appropriate response, including developing professional development, working with our principals, our instructional coaches, and our teachers. I want you to know that the concerns shared by our community are important to hear and share with the publishers that put these materials together. There are many similarities between the content in publishers, and there's very few of those. But Lynn and Dr. Corson and the rest of their team has already begun sharing our community's concerns and will continue to do so. This is not necessarily a local issue, and it is an issue that the publishers have acknowledged that they are hearing across the nation. I do believe that will influence their work. In addition to the professional development on the teachers regarding recent legislation for prohibited instruction as it pertains to the teaching of science, social studies and history, we will provide professional development to teachers to instruct them of any other content that may be either inaccurate or not age appropriate. If necessary, as Dr. Corson mentioned, we can adopt different materials sooner than this cycle. And finally, we will work to identify more effective ways to communicate with our stakeholders about curriculum adoptions before, during, and after the process. I've already begun working with Kia Karada, the president of UPC. We've started that conversation about strategies to gather some time and talent information of parents and community members who might be terrific additions to our committees when we need volunteers to serve. As I mentioned earlier in my goals and objectives about increasing greater student and parent feedback voice, we will continue to do those things mentioned earlier. And President Greenberg, those are my comments, and I turn it back to you for any public comment, board questions, or otherwise.
Thank you.
No, it's up to you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Mrs. Matura has some clarifying questions, and then we have some cards from, and if anybody else has clarifying questions, we can do those first, and then we'll go to
Okay.
comment. Well, Mrs. Matura has some, and then Mrs. Case, I'll call on you.
I just wanted to clarify that we're looking at resources changing, but we're not looking at curriculum changing. Is that correct? That we're not changing what is taught, we're changing the resources that teachers can use as they're teaching, so it aligns better with the 2018 adoption. Is that correct? But the content isn't shifting?
Well, the content, if I'm understanding your question correctly, Ms. Matura, the content is represented in the 2018 standards, and we've identified resources that best align to that content being taught.
But we haven't necessarily aligned our education to those standards yet, have we?
Yes, those standards are.
So we started doing third grade Arizona what year?
That's correct. This past year was the first year of the state's implementation of the new standards in this past year.
But the resources could change the content, just not the actual, not the actual standard by which the state, we're not changing standards, but the content would potentially be different depending on the resource used. Right? Is that?
But those resources are aligned with the grade level standards that specifies both the content and the skills that are to be taught at those particular grade levels.
Yeah, I was only clarifying the word content, resources, and curriculum. Like that the content could be different, even though the curriculum standard is aligned with what it's already been for a year, right?
Correct.
All right, Mrs. Mature, do you have any other questions?
If a teacher already has a favorite unit that they've been using and teaching over the years, as long as that continues to meet state standards, can they continue to teach that unit as opposed to presenting it the way that it's in the new resources if they already have a unit built?
Yeah, of course. What's most important is that what is being taught is in alignment with the standards, both in terms of the content, topics, and skills within that. And, our teachers across our district do have autonomy to approach those topics in a variety of ways to ensure that they are aligning their instruction with where their students are at. So if a teacher has a favorite unit that is in alignment at that particular grade level, they can do that. And we see that, for example, in our core knowledge schools. Our core knowledge schools continue to use core knowledge curriculum, which is different than the resources provided here, but they're still even aligning their core knowledge units at the proper grade level for the content that's being taught.
And one last question, I'm sorry. In a year, will a class go through all of the lessons that are laid out in these books? Do they have time to do that? Or is it certain ones that meet with the state standards that are hit on and they're not teaching bookend to bookend?
Yeah, oftentimes that's not the case. There is so much content usually embedded within a school year scope that oftentimes we are working with our teacher groups to identify what we call the essential standards or prioritized standards within that particular grade level. And so around those prioritized standards is where we line up instruction.
Thank you.
Mrs. Case, you said you had a question?
My question is of the order of, I have a comment to make. Would I make that now? Would I make it later? Do I make it after the community makes comments?
If you have a question, a clarification question, this would be a good time.
Okay, I have a question and then later I
And
have
then
a
later,
comment.
yeah, comments
Okay,
later.
I just wanted to get the order of what we were doing. It's kind of complicated. Thank you. I had a discussion with Dr. Corson earlier today, and I suggested we keep our old textbooks because there could be a teacher who had been using, as Mrs. Matura mentioned, using a textbook for a certain subject. They liked it. It worked. They have the materials. It's available. And I have also suggested in the past that because the new fourth grade materials in the new third grade material Splash don't have colored pictures, they're black and white, that they could keep the fourth grade textbooks to supplement anything they needed to with charts and maps, et cetera. But those are just some housekeeping ideas that I have had.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
Well, just as a comment to the Splash being in black and white, the Studies Weekly is in color that is also available to third and fourth grade. But my question is about the additional curriculum department commitments. One of the bullets says we'll work closely with Marketing Communications Department to identify more effective ways to communicate with our stakeholders about curriculum adoptions before, during, and after the process. And I really don't mean to put anyone on the spot, but I'm wondering if we have any ideas about how to do that. I know that Dr. Bales mentioned that he's already speaking to the United Parent Council about it, but not everyone tunes in for the United Parent Council information. And so I was just curious if this is something that would be like included in like a monthly newsletter or some other, if there were any ideas that have been thrown out yet.
Yeah, we've discussed several ideas, Ms. Brown. Those include using our community newsletter to publish information about the adoption. It also includes better placement on the website. We feel that, oftentimes the information might be buried on several clicks embedded, and maybe we can put that during adoption times more at the forefront of that. And it also includes that within the committee is that, we do have representative stakeholders on that committee, and to make sure that we have more systemic and systematic ways for them to communicate the progress of the committee out to their stakeholder groups. And I think that if we get a little bit better about those systems, that will improve the communication.
So along those lines, it would be to sort of educating those stakeholders about their responsibility or accountability as it relates. I know you're saying systemic or systematic processes, but I'm not exactly sure. I've been on committees and I've been, part of United Parent Council, but I'm not sure how you would change the process it's difficult to go to parents and get more feedback, right? I mean, it can be difficult it's a lot on the United Parent Council president to be expected to, they can't communicate with that many parents. But I like the idea of it being in like the monthly newsletter, or you said community newsletter. Is there any other clarification on how that process would be? It doesn't, I'm not trying to put you on the spot if there isn't more. I just didn't understand what you meant by systemic process.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. So, during the committee process, a couple of areas that I think that we can be more effective in the committee process is designating specific times during the committee when we want information to be communicated out to the stakeholders, and actually providing what that communication piece is to assist our stakeholder group representatives to more effectively communicate out in a consistent way what the messages are. And really kind of making that a responsibility of those committee members.
Ms. Case, this is a question?
Yes, it's kind of a question comment. In going through materials, it's an enormous amount of material to go through. I mean, enormous. And in speaking with other districts, I mentioned this to you today also. In Mesa, when I was talking to the school board members there, they have an advisory council, which board members choose someone to help them look at materials. And I think that's something as a board we could consider at some time, because this is a very large adoption. And anyway, I just think that's something that this is my only chance to communicate this to all my board members. And I thought that was a really interesting point that what Mesa does with they have an advisory council. I can't remember if it's 1 or 2 per board member. They choose someone who they feel comfortable with to look at materials, and they might change that person according to their expertise in the area. So I think that's something we could look at. Also, perhaps at school board meetings, it was announced tonight that 9-12 math is going to be changing in the future. So perhaps at every school board meeting, we could let the public know we are having an adoption coming up in this particular area, and remind people of an ongoing process of that. And perhaps it's in the board doc, excuse me, agenda papers or something, so that people always have that in mind. I don't want it to happen like it has happened this past year. And so I'm trying to think of different ways to alleviate that from happening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions or for clarification on the part of the board, because we obviously still will have time to discuss, we have, I believe, 8 cards. So I'm more than happy if the board agrees that everyone can have 3 minutes if they so desire. And the first card is Raquel Kimball. Raquel, I know you've been here for a while, so thank you for staying.
I get 3 minutes, right? Okay, so first, thank you. And I'm not just meaning it like other people will try to get points with you and make you feel good. Really, thank you. During the summer, when a lot of people went out and had vacation and had their time, some of you guys took the time to read the materials, to really look what it was there. Some parents, thank you. I personally know that I expended hours and hours looking at these materials, and I appreciate that. So thank you for doing that. I had all this pill, and I was talking about something else, but I thought that I may change it a little bit. Dr. Carson, I can't pronounce your name very well. I'm sorry, it's my accent, but it sounds really good. Everything looks really good. It looks like the perfect pie that you want to eat, guys. And I talked to some of the members on the committee. I know them and I respect them. And the first thing that she told me, and she's a friend. So she told me, you know what your problem is, Raquel, is you don't trust the district. And I told her, you are correct. Let me tell you what I don't trust the district sometimes, not all the times. Sometimes I respect the district immensely, every single one of you guys. I have interact and my respect for you is so great. I just come back, get out of the plane, and my daughter told me, Mom, did you hear what happened? And I said, no. I went to drop off a care package for a friend that was sick, and he's a sophomore. And I asked him, what have you been doing? And he said, oh, I have been doing my summer reading. And she asked her, what book have you been reading? And it's a book that last year, Dr. Corson, you promised me that it will never happen again. It's not included on the approved list. And I have a talk with Miss Inette about it last year, during the summer also, that it will never be happen again. And it's the same book that they promised that it wasn't be placed on the list again. I was on the literacy committee for 2 years, guys, for 2 years. Those committees are long and gruesome. I miss piano recitals. I miss soccer practices for my daughters, soccer games. And my first question that I had when that committee came into place, it was, what are we making these changes? What are we making these committees when teachers can really teach whatever they want? And they assure me, Ms. Kimball, no, what we're doing is a very important work. We need this list so the teachers know exactly what they're going to be teaching. I trusted it. I trust the process. I sacrificed. And the first summer, after the 2 years that I expended on that committee, 2 books that were not approved on the list were placed on the summer reading for my daughter. I could read to you. I sent a letter to Dr. Carson, and I put the examples of material that was totally inappropriate. References to masturbation, references to pornography, that if the teachers were to read those materials to our students in the classroom, there will be prosecution for some charges. It's not appropriate. If that was a movie, it couldn't be shown to our kids. But we are assigning those assignments to our kids during summer when there is no supervision. You promised me that that wouldn't happen again. That's what I'm fighting these guys. I want to trust the district, but my experience.
The next card here is Sandra Christensen.
Thank you, Dr. Bells and the board. This is only my second meeting, and it's very enlightening, so thank you for letting us speak. During the last school board meeting on June 23rd, I heard many parents speak about the new social studies curriculum, and I admit I was a bit taken aback because I had not read through the curriculum myself. And based on the input of the parents that spoke, it seemed that many of the materials had language similar to CRT, even though they weren't calling it CRT. As a Latino American, I'm so proud of my heritage and my family. My ancestors have lived here in the US since before it was part of the United States. So I appreciate culture. I appreciate, people of all races. My dad was a entrepreneur, grocery store owner, and he taught me hard work, but he never taught me about race. He never taught me that I was different from anybody else. And so I didn't even know I was a minority growing up because I just thought I was like everybody else. But my son is going to be a sophomore this year at Horizon High School, and I'm really sad to hear some of the stories that are coming out about just what's being taught in our schools. 4 years ago, when my son was in 5th grade, he was taught by his homeroom teacher that all the founding fathers were bad because they own slaves. And that this teacher also told my son that working at Walmart was akin to modern day slavery because they don't pay their employees well. So I had to talk to my son about capitalism and things like that. And so that was kind of my first awakening. So what I just want to say as a mom is just, I've worked so hard to teach my son that skin color doesn't matter and that he should be proud that he's a Latino American, but that I just feel that we're taking a step back when we start teaching this stuff in the classrooms. And my son is not a victim or an oppressor. He's a strong-minded, critical thinker. And I don't want his teachers to tell him otherwise. So I just hope that, we just keep the opinions and things like that out of the schools and just teach history and teach things that make them think. I mean, it's fine to bring up these topics, but let the kids banter back and forth and just don't push that stuff on them, because it just breaks my heart to hear some of the things that he tells me. So, but thank you for your time, and I appreciate all of you. I know you volunteered time for this, so we as parents really appreciate you, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. The next card is from Lisa Farr.
So first of all, I want to say to Dr. Bells, you have gone a long way in building trust with me. Thank you. The UPC has not built trust with me. And so I caution you on accepting the people that they appoint to committees to review materials or to make recommendations. I think that's something that you do need to look into. I'm thankful that we do have a law now that will allow us to take civil action and fines against anyone who adopts or tries to implement any type of critical race theory into the classroom. But I want you to all be aware that that entire committee that is making this recommendation, this entire cabinet, and any teacher that would try to implement any of that into the classroom is subject to a $5,000 civil fine, and that's per person. This cannot come from district funds. It cannot come from insurance funds. This is civil money. I want to make sure that each of you understand that, the committee understands that, and that you are 100% confident that this curriculum does not contain critical race theory materials in it, because if not, you're putting yourself at liability, and you're putting a lot of people at liability. So basically, if I were you, I would be asking the publishers to put it in writing that that material is not in the curriculum. Because no, I don't expect you to be able to go through all of this. There's no way any one person or committee can actually dive into this at this level. But really for your protection and our assurance, get it in writing from these publishers so that we know it's not in there. Because I guarantee you, if we find it, if any of us parents find it, it will be very public. We will take action. So for your protection, I think you think twice about it before you just adopt it without making some of those considerations. Thank you.
The next card is from Jennifer Croning.
I was a parent that took the time to review the DBQ curriculum and the Discovery Education curriculum for the 7th and 8th graders. And the curriculum, the content is vast. It includes videos, resources, supplemental materials, and it includes critical race theory. You can tell us that the teachers will be trained not to use that material. It is in the material. And when we have national and local teacher groups saying that regardless of state law, regardless of district policies, they are going to bring these ideas into the classroom with our children, it creates a lot of distrust with parents. And my experience with social studies teachers in this district is that they're very professional and they have not been political. But this climate is creating a lot of distrust. And then when you introduce a curriculum that contains these ideas, how do we know as parents that our kids are not going to come across on their own, or these videos aren't going to be shared in the classroom. If you want to provide transparency to parents, you need to provide access at any time for parents to review any and all of these materials that could be used from these platforms in the classroom. Thank you.
The next card is, excuse me, is from Diane Neiman.
Okay, I'm very encouraged to hear from Dr. Bales that you want to improve transparency and to reveal all materials. That was your goal number 3. So I have talked to a person that did review the social studies curriculum, and they said something that disturbed me. As a believer in Jesus Christ, I really believe in our founding fathers being Christian in the most part. And there were topics in the social studies that did defame our founding fathers. So you might ask me, do I have any suggestions? I do. To help remedy this, number 1, I would suggest that you let the students take home their books so the parents can see what they're studying as they go along. And also the outlines of the upcoming materials that they're going to learn. Number 2, allow the parents to opt out of certain subjects if they see in this outline something that they don't agree with. And the third thing is I suggest the use of microphones for teachers in the classroom so the parents can listen in to the classroom materials. Thank you very much.
We have a card from Nicole Klutwick.
Guys, I know it's a late night and you guys do so much to prepare for this, so I really do appreciate. I know you guys addressed the fact that not enough stakeholders were aware of what was going on. I think that's still the case. There's still a lot of stakeholders who are not aware of what's going on, and saying that we're going to address it next time in 7 years when all of my children are graduated from high school doesn't really address, it's not an appropriate, nothing about that solution is appropriate. I mean, good that we're going to do it better next time, but we have the chance and the opportunity to fix that problem now. There's no reason why we need to table it till 7 years ago. And I know you guys alluded, maybe we'll do it less than. That's not a promise, and that doesn't make parents today feel any better in that situation. With the very limited time that parents had in order to vet the stuff, two things were removed from the curriculum. So given parents enough time to actually vet all of the material, how much more are we going to find is inappropriate? I mean, it's a big question that that I think we really need to consider. This right here is the rubric that the teachers and stakeholders, not stakeholders, the committee was supposed to use to go through. Literally nothing in here asks about bias, asks about political perspectives, asks about race, stereotyping. Nothing in here addresses that. And so for us to move forward and say we feel comfortable with this curriculum when it's never been addressed at all in the rubric seems irresponsible. On top of that, I went through and looked through the meeting notes to see how many teachers, like I particularly have an 8th grader, how many 8th grade teachers looked at and gave comments on these materials. There's 3 pages that look similar to this. That was all of the comments, and I counted up, and there was 1 teacher who commented on each of one 8th grade teacher who commented on each of those. That is not an adequate, and we got 2 comments from teachers during this process, the June review process. That's not adequate input from stakeholders. I also want to say the timing of this curriculum is very, very concerning. Based on the information that you guys have published in the board meeting notes, it says it's effective July 1st, 2021. That means this year, right? School starts in 5 days. So either teachers have been preparing the curriculum, which a board has not approved, And input from parents was never actually considered to be important. So either parent, it's already been rolled out to teachers, and we really weren't actually important, or teachers are going to be asked to implement this in 5 days, and they've never. A little concerned that people have already made up their minds. Please consider your vote.
The next card is from Nicholas Smith.
Good evening. As a parent of a 4th and 5th grader, the timing of this curriculum is just perfect. And I want to say a couple things to begin with. One, I echo the comments of every speaker who has spoken tonight. There's many things which are concerning. I also want to echo that I do applaud and appreciate all the time that's been put into this to date. However, I respectfully disagree with the findings of the committee. Specifically, I would like to address the content, the age-appropriate content of some specific material. The examples I'm going to provide tonight are from the Discovery Education material, which is being recommended to be go into effect a couple months ago, earlier this month, last month, which is the question. I don't know how that's working. As an example, for the 5th grade, there's a video called Discrimination and Stereotypes, in which it addresses stereotypes. Fantastic content. I love the idea. Fantastic topic. However, the example that it uses is the concept of rape. That's not appropriate for a 10-year-old kid. That should never be addressed by a 10-year-old kid. Further, there's other material that the teachers are instructed to teach throughout this curriculum what was being provided around the concepts of sexual orientation, gender, race. These are sensitive, complex topics. These should be addressed at home. These should not be addressed by parents, and as it's recommended for grades 3rd to 5th. That's not appropriate. Another example that I'd like to provide is in the curriculum for the kindergarten to 2nd graders. It says the teachers are instructed to instruct about, quote, perceptions of racial differences. I love my daughter and my son, when they were in kindergarten, they didn't have a clue what race was. It is not appropriate that we instruct our teachers to teach our children, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, about racial perceptions. That is beyond them. It is inappropriate, and it leans towards bias. There's other content in the material which is skewed and biased. And I don't care which side of the political spectrum you're on, it goes the wrong way. It's inappropriate. I respectfully ask you, do not approve the curriculum. Please, please, please don't do it. Send it back, give the parents more time to review, let them come back. I was able to provide these examples in the short amount of time that was provided. There's other content out there that's just not appropriate. Thank you.
And the last card we have is from Trevor Nelson.
Thanks. I thank you for pursuing new social studies curriculum for our students. A few years ago, I discovered that my oldest, who's a sophomore, was actually younger than the social studies textbook they were using. So he's turning 16. The textbook was over 20 years old in his classroom. Teaching history and social science, some people say it hasn't really changed. Those people, I think, are knuckleheads. It has changed. It's no longer just dates and names and white people. And I look forward to reviewing more of the material. I wasn't given a chance to, and maybe offer some of my opinions. And I'm curious if and when material will be available for community members to review. And if that's already passed, then I'd ask for maybe more time to review. And I got 2 whole minutes. I could keep talking if I wanted to, but I'm not going to. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Getting used to that. So that was all of the cards for public comment. Next, I would ask for a motion, and then we can open it for discussion.
So moved.
Right. Does any board member, Mrs. Case?
Thank you. I don't normally write out my comments. Tonight I did. I first of all want to thank the Social Studies Committee, which met over this past school year and again in July to review the letters from parents and teachers regarding the social study adoption materials. This has been an enormous undertaking for the committee and for the parents who took the time in June to review the materials. I personally spent hours and days reviewing just parts of the materials. The materials, if printed, could be stacked from the floor all the way to the ceiling. If you printed all of that material, and it is extremely hard to navigate some of it, you click on one thing, it goes to another, you go to another. Even in the printed materials, it can go on for 20 pages on just a studies weekly. So there is a lot of material. We are mandated by the state to review our materials and start teaching the new state standards by this school year. It is not a choice. We have to teach the new state standards. The standards have changed what is taught in each grade level. The biggest change to our district would be teaching Arizona history in 3rd grade instead of 4th, and teaching American history and 4th and 5th grade instead of just 5th. Mainly teaching exploration of the Americas in 4th grade, and then the founding fathers and documents and so on in 5th. 6th grade is still world history. 7th and 8th grade will change. In our district, American history for the last, I'm not sure how many years, has had 2 years. They've taken 7th grade and 8th grade to teach American history because it is such a large subject. Now the state standards put American history in 7th grade and then has civics, civic engagement, and finances in 8th grade. And there's some other things in 8th grade, and I'm not going to go into all those. We have to, as a public school district, teach Arizona state standards. And by the way, I personally don't have a problem with the state standards, but I do have a problem with the materials. I personally have found conclusions in these materials, these proposed materials, which I firmly disagree with. I'm not going to go into detail for that, but I will tell you, in my hours of research, I have found things I disagreed with. I've mentioned those to cabinet members and Dr. Bells. I have also learned in looking through this material, I love history, and I have also learned some things that I really enjoyed learning about. I truly have. But my conclusion is I do not think we should adopt these materials. I believe the K-8 students in our district would be better served if we adopted core knowledge as our curriculum in our district. I understand the difficulties with this ideas. I have brought this up for the last 16 years in our district. I've gone to some core knowledge training. It is incredible. But with the new Arizona state standards changes, core knowledge becomes even more difficult to implement in our district because of things being changed on grade levels. It used to be 4th grade was always the state, you learn about your state that year. Core knowledge is across the country. But so the textbooks, core knowledge textbooks are now even further removed in sequence than they were with the old Arizona social studies state standards. But our core knowledge schools have been figuring this out over the last couple of years and adjusting their grade level units to deal with state standards being different in different grades. Core Knowledge is a tried and true program which has been enjoyed by our students, parents, and teachers for many, many years in our district. It is a project-based learning program which engages students in special ways. I believe the content level is richer and time-tested than many other programs. I understand the extra costs associated with Core Knowledge. I've been being told this for years and years and years. I understand. But PV has figured out complicated and hard things before and will in the future. The training for Core Knowledge is extensive and expensive and time-consuming, but I believe it would be worth it. I appreciate Dr. Bell's listening to parents' concerns and opening up the materials for an extra month review this summer because of the parents' concerns. This COVID year has complicated many, many aspects in education in our district and in all districts. I appreciate Dr. Bell's sound judgment in allowing parents more time to review. And I appreciate the committee changing some of the recommended materials and considering the opinions of our parents and teachers. I ask again that we keep the old textbooks and that I would suggest that we do not adopt these materials. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any comments or questions?
I have a lot of comments. I have a couple of questions. Is there the, I left my microphone on this whole time. Is there the ability for us to officially change it from 7 years to 3 years?
The answer is yes.
Okay. That is something that I would like to see. I have more questions. Is there another curriculum available besides DBQ for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade? I know that we have Discovery Education, but the DBQ materials are supplemental, right? Is there something along those lines that could be looked at for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade that would be different? I don't have to go back and look at what was reviewed. Is that, like, could we approve it without that, is I guess the question.
If I'm understanding your question, could we approve reducing 6th, 7th, and 8th grade to just Discovery Education and eliminate the DBQ project?
And there's an understanding that teachers have the ability to get other materials to supplement as well, right? Like, it just wouldn't be officially across the district? Is that, like, teachers use other materials at times?
Teachers do use a variety of supplemental materials, usually decided upon by that site, oftentimes for supplemental materials. But if it is the direction of this board to remove DBQ, then we would still have Discovery Education's tech book as the primary resource.
So I'd like that to also be up for our discussion about this. Somebody else has questions or comments, they might want to go before me.
Does anybody else have any particular questions or comments, or should we just let Mrs. Byrne continue?
She talked about other materials for years. To Sandra Day O'Connor, civics. She has promoted civics, and I believe that is a free forum. I believe it is free. 4th and above. So to fulfill the recommendations for 8th grade civics, that is a possibility. Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Brown, I guess if you have additional comments, questions.
Yeah,
just a second. Um, Sorry. I have mainly comments now. Okay. I just want to address some of what the public commented on. So I appreciate the concern that was brought to our attention by Raquel Kimball. I can see how the literature experience, the committee experience that you had could significantly impact your trust. And I too am concerned about that specific example. My computer is going to die and I need to get the charger for it. I also want to comment on I'm concerned about what Sandra Christensen said about what her son was taught in 4th or 5th grade. And that I appreciate the information that that Lisa Farr mentioned about the $5,000 civil fine, and that we should ask the publishers to commit. But I also do know that these publishers have, I believe, on their website stated that it does not, that their materials don't contain CRT, which is part of how we made a decision. So I just want to clarify that that's true. And then when Jennifer Kronig mentioned that she thinks that that was Nicole, but that that parents should have access to all materials anytime. That is the intention of what partly Dr. Bales had mentioned in the beginning of your goals, right? That is something that you're planning on working towards.
That is correct.
Okay. And the materials, this also addresses Trevor Nelson, are still currently online and accessible to the public and have been. So you did have access to the materials during this time. And I was looking at them today, so I imagine they're still there. Nicole is concerned that it will not be soon enough. And I just want to clarify that the process improvements are being made with our very next curriculum, or our very next committees. It's not that we're going to wait 7 years to change the committee improvements, right? I mean, that's what, I just want to clarify that, even though I realize that it, right, no, I know, but I just wanted to address that it isn't something that we're just going to dismiss for years as a whole. And I think Nicholas Smith mentioned some things that he feels uncomfortable with that are part of what the law requires us to teach. It's within some of the standards. Some of the concerns you have are literally written as things that we're supposed to, that we are to provide information about. Not all of it, but there are some things that you mentioned that are literally in our standards, as that we are supposed to address certain things about race, certain things about gender identity. I'm not saying that we determine that for them. I'm just saying that it's written in some of our standards, without bias, of course. That as I so you may want to, it's on the Arizona Department of Education website. You can look at that. I'm not going to defend it. I'm just telling you that some of what you mentioned that you're uncomfortable with, you should probably take up with the state. And I think a lot of people may be as well, but now to the rest of my comments. I read every email that was sent to the board up until 2 p.m. today, every single email. I have so appreciated all of the time and energy that everyone who has reached out to us has put into our community and into our children's education. I mean that sincerely. I appreciate it. I've been the parent that's sitting in the boardroom and speaking to the board. I understand where you're coming from. I agreed with the concerns about the DBQs and the Newsella and the concerns that the committee materials were presented and available during a time that most of the community had no idea there was a committee or materials for review. I agreed that the concerns that all of it was done during a ridiculously challenging year, one that PV had 3 superintendents and one and many parents responsible for keeping their kids home when they'd normally be in school. So everybody's lives were different. I have subsequently been pleased that our superintendent and cabinet reopened the materials and made them available to the public. I'm also pleased that the committee reconvened and provided an updated recommendation with some of the recommendations that were made. With the exception of the lack of parent feedback that UPC was able to provide last year, I've been pleased with the committee process and the stakeholder representation across the entire district to some degree with improvements. The improvements that were made in the end and the commitment for continual improvement is important. I've had the opportunity to review all the materials except for the one that was not available online. I've been impressed with the materials in many cases, finding them engaging and interesting, consistent with accuracy, and that they align with the state curriculum standards that we don't determine. These suggested materials have been chosen for their alignment with the state standards, their engaging content. I had requested that some of that would be shown, but it sounds like most of you have looked at a lot of it. And I've carefully reviewed some for bias concerns, and I do have an issue with DBQs. Some of the concerns were addressed by other organizations. In particular, Discovery Education was looked at by Florida Social Studies Content Review, and they found that it scored the highest of all social studies programs reviewed with an overall rating of 96%, including a 100% score for the following categories: accuracy of content, the content of the material presented objectively, material should be free from bias and contradictions and is not inflammatory in nature. Accuracy of content, the content in the material is representative of the discipline, such as the material should be including prevailing theories, concepts, standards, and models within the subject area. Also, with accuracy of content, the content of the materials is factual and accurate as it is free of mistakes and inconsistencies according to that organization. The currency of the content, being current, the content is up to date according to current research and standards of practice. Currency of content, the content is presented to the curriculum standards and benchmarks in an appropriate and relevant context. Currency of content, the content is presented in an appropriate and relevant context for the intended learners. Multicultural representation, the portrayal of gender, ethnicity, age, work situations, cultural, religious, physical, and various social groups are fair and unbiased. Humanity and compassion, these materials portray people and animals with compassion, sympathy, and consider their needs and values and exclude hardcore pornography and inhumane treatment. Additionally, I have been pleased with that is not for the DBQs. That was specifically describing the Discovery Education materials. And so I wanted to make that clear that some of Florida's Florida content, Discovery Education, Florida Social Studies content review findings. I'm not sure that it is Discovery that wrote it. So there.
This is
But
actually
but
time
you're
for
doing
the
a public comment. I gotta finish. Right. So, and I'm happy that Newsella was eliminated too. I'm pleased that we're eliminating DBQ and Newsella as well as the cost of them. I would like to see DBQ removed from 6th, 7th, and 8th grade also. I trust our educators, our teachers, and our principals that they know it is acceptable to our community and that they will honor the law and the community's interest. And I'm especially appreciative of the extended commitment that has been mentioned by our superintendent as well as the committee and Dr. Corson and Ms. Hoppus, sorry. I am concerned that we're behind a year, and delaying this further hurts our responsibility to provide updated resources and curriculum. But I'm also concerned about many of the concerns that were raised in the public comment. So I've addressed some of those things, and some of my requests for approving include the 3 years removing of the removing of the DBQ. So.
So, Mrs. Matura, did you?
I have a question. If it is done as a 3-year versus a 7-year, does that mean that it's required to form a new committee in 3 years? Is that what the difference is between a 3-year adoption and a 7-year adoption? Because our last resource adoption was actually in 2005, and I doubt it was for a 16-year adoption. So what does that mean in actuality is a question. And then is the DBQ project, that is an online resource, is that correct?
It says online.
It's an
It is.
online program that if it were removed today, it's something that could be researched and added back in later because it's not a physical book to purchase.
Oh.
It would be, I mean, is that?
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, DBQ comes in two formats. There are some hard copy formats that it comes in, but what the committee is recommending is online. So I think that answers your first question. The difference between a 3-year and 7-year is certainly something that we can do. We can do a 3-year adoption. And what that would mean is that we would form a committee again in year 3 to make considerations for the year 4 adoptions. And those recommendations could be to continue with the resources that we have or entertain new resources, but it would be the discretion of that committee. The only other consideration would be that at that time that we would rewrite our contracts with the vendors, indicating 3 years. Sometimes that will cause a price adjustment. Vendors will. Yeah, other than, so it would be some price adjustments in terms of the curriculum materials, oftentimes a little bit higher price because we're doing a little bit of a shorter adoption is typically the trend. But I don't have information in terms of what those cost adjustments would be. But we certainly can do a 3-year adoption if that is the direction of this board.
It was mentioned earlier that Discovery Education is entering into negotiations with the Arizona Department of Education to provide. Would that save us the cost of what is listed here? No.
No, there are two platforms to Discovery Education, and the platform that the ADE has contracted with Discovery is what's called their Experience platform. And that's what's considered oftentimes a supplemental resource. The one that we're recommending as in this recommendation, the committee is recommending, is what's called the Discovery Tech Book. And they're still the same company. This is just a more robust primary resource curriculum.
Okay, so then our schools would also have access to that supplement. It would be at no cost.
At no cost, that's correct. At least for this first year, Discovery Education is still in conversations with ADE about what that would look like after year 1.
I'd like to make a comment. The Reekley studies in our conversation today, is it my understanding, is this correct? That is a yearly cost, and you said it was around 110,000 a year, is that correct? For the studies weekly rather, and that is each year it costs that much for K-5, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, because that wasn't in any of our paperwork or the numbers, so I wanted to bring that up.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Bacon?
Obviously, clearly, we need to improve our process. We need to make sure that this information is not reliant on our stakeholder groups to get out. It is our responsibility as a district to get the information to you so that you can do your due diligence. So I think we all know that. We've all acknowledged that. I think Dr. Bales has been pretty upfront about that. So I'm appreciative of the fact that the committee looked at some of the resources where there was a lot of concern about and elected to get for those to go away. I think that's really positive thing. The question, I have a couple of questions, and the first one is, if we were to get, if we were to remove the DBQ from 6, 7, and 8, would we have the opportunity to replace that with something else that's more acceptable? Or would we just have to go with the discovery education and have that be the only material?
Ms. Bacon, for now, we would be just implementing discovery education. We would probably need to reassemble either the existing committee or another committee to look at recommending another resource, and we'd want to follow that process to do that.
Okay, thank you. My other question is, and it's really for Dr. Bales, what can we do in the next year to really examine what's being taught, what's happening in classrooms? You know, how can we make sure that our stakeholders who have concerns, that they're heard? Is there a process that we can come up with? Is there a complaint form? Is there something that we can do, like an online form? What can we do to help with these concerns that people are having? And really, not just about this, about everything. You know, that's something that I think we need to be thinking about always. So that's just my question.
Yeah, I mentioned, the commitments that we talked about both in the presentation as well as, some of the goals and objectives that I mentioned for me personally and professionally in this role as a new superintendent. It is one of those things that, is continuing to evolve. And, our cabinet has been talking about strategies, right, to support those objectives about transparency and access. I mentioned how our goal is to get this all online as soon as possible so people can see it anytime, anywhere. That's not an easy endeavor to do, but we're committed to doing it. Working with the publishers and getting, permissions and access, is going to be a challenge, but it's one we're willing to tackle because we want our community to have access to that. We made a commitment to, continue to collect feedback and make changes. If there are units in some of this adopted primary source materials that just isn't drawing the right conclusions, or it needs direct re-instruction on how teachers, tackle that content, we're committed to doing that. I, certainly can support, a revised 3-year to come back and revisit this. I can support, the modifications for DBQ eliminated at 6, 7, and 8. And I can support the opportunity, as Dr. Corson indicated, to reevaluate whether or not something needs to be provided in lieu of the DBQ elimination. I mentioned earlier about our commitments to talking about how we can gain greater voice in that process. At one point we kicked around the ideas of an application process for membership at large. We've kicked around the idea, and I like the one that Mrs. Case mentioned here about an advisory board. So these are things that we will follow up on. I don't think I've demonstrated the inability to follow up on the commitments that I make. It is very difficult to move an organization of 3,700 employees overnight. And it's one thing when we adopt the standards, the curriculum resource materials that support the standards, because we all know the challenge is what happens in the classroom, right? And it's made or break. And we actually have to inspect what we expect. And that's our responsibility as administrators to do so. It's not easy. That's not an excuse. I just want people to realize the enormous task that it has. As a former high school principal with 2,600 kids and 100 and some classrooms, it's not as easy to visit every classroom every day, right? And but we will do that. We will inspect what we expect. It's a process of improvement that we're committed to. So I've mentioned some of the things that have been tossed out as revisions to the motion that I think we can support. I am deeply concerned about if we don't provide materials, teachers will continue to get what they want, right? And this in here is the challenge. At least we know what we're providing, and it can bring this in a little bit and say, all right, here it is, right? Stay within this parameter and within these things. If not, it's a free-for-all. And we have to address that too.
Yeah, we do. So, I mean, for me, I'm most concerned about having the immediate ability for parents to provide their concerns. And I know you did address that, Dr. Corson, and I appreciate it. I'd like it to be a little bit more visible, like on the district's webpage, homepage. You know, if you have a curriculum issue, click this link and we'll get it to the right person to address, you know,
I
the
agree with that.
question. So if we can do something like that, that is something that I would support, I think is important, and it's been important for the 11 years that I've been on the board. So it's not new important, it's always been important. So that would be the one thing that I would like to see a commitment to, and it sounds like you are committed to doing that, and I appreciate that.
Mrs. Case?
I have a question. With the K2 McGraw-Hill adoption, how much different is it than the materials we already have? They go through community, city, state, you're a member of a community, et cetera. Is it that much different than what we already have? K2.
Yeah, Lynn,
Can't hear you.
can you come to the mic, please?
I think that's the real issue, is 2005 was a long time ago. And so we don't have materials left. And the teachers are scrambling to kind of come up with their own materials, which then you don't have continuity, you don't have consistency. And that I think is the big concern, is because those materials, and I know you were referring to the Brown, Arizona book, which I used, but not every school has them. I can't fill, there's all of the elementary schools don't have those books anymore.
I was told we still had them, that they were packed out of the classroom, but they were at the school sites. That's what I was told.
But they are not at every single school.
I think the question, Lynn, is this because of attrition and they haven't been in print to repurchase? So just by nature of things wear out and just, okay.
That's it.
So they're left at somebody's house, the person moves, doesn't return the books, et cetera. So you're saying there's not enough materials?
I don't believe there are enough, and I have not done, you know, any kind of a poll to see, but I know that we don't have enough fifth grade materials. We didn't have enough sixth grade materials this year. Those books are not even in print anymore. And the same thing with the Arizona book. That's the problem.
Okay, so because of use and
Yes.
discarding, so you're not saying the schools have gotten rid of them?
No.
It's that they weren't brought back, they wore out, they got
Correct.
watered, et cetera.
Yes.
Okay, but I was asking about the content. Was it that much difference, K2 from the old books than the new books? That's my question. I don't know if you didn't teach those grades, so that's not.
I was going to say, I'm trying to think, did I teach second grade or first grade? That it's been a while.
Yeah.
Well, the
But I don't-
standards have changed.
The standards have changed, but I don't know if they've changed. Have the standards changed that much in K2? I don't know.
No, they've not significantly changed. Probably what has changed are some anchor threads that go through all social studies standards now, which are new, and certainly an inquiry-based approach, which is the direction of our state standards, and that is one of the features that the McGraw-Hill textbook does, is it engages students in much more inquiry-based approach, and that was a benefit of that textbook.
So what does it mean, the inquiry? I mean, you say that all the time, but what does
Yeah.
it mean in
Yeah.
everyday terms?
Oftentimes leading with what we call an essential question or an overarching question that is engaging or interesting about a historical concept or event, and then providing students a variety of different perspectives and resources around that. And engaging students in reading a variety of resources around that, and then asking students to draw conclusions about what they have learned as a result of that, and then to demonstrate that understanding, usually in written form, but sometimes in project form as well.
Okay. That's one of the reasons I suggested core knowledge in those younger grades, is because the richness of the program in core knowledge, as opposed to the books we currently have and these new McGraw-Hill. There's much more richness and in-depth project-based learning, which I think leads itself to what you just described, asking questions. Just doing the project-based and bringing in ideas, I think it leads itself to what the state is trying to get us to do.
Yeah, oftentimes project-based learning, or sometimes what's called problem-based learning, oftentimes leads to that same kind of approach.
Experience. Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Matura?
I wanted to point out, I think something unique about our district, I don't think all districts do have an assistant superintendent of instruction. Is that correct? So our Dr. Corson here. And what I appreciate and I think is so important for our district is that we have Dr. Corson here who has a department that can take the curriculum and they go through the mapping where it shows here's how this matches with the state standards, and it allows the teachers then to do what they do best, which is teach and not have to find the resources, make sure it aligns with the new state standards. Are they up to date with what state standards have changed? Have they done all this? So without a resource for our teachers to be using, they're kind of left on their own, and they don't have we're not taking advantage of the commitment that we've made for our district in doing the GVC, Guaranteed Viable Curriculum Mapping, and we have the staff and the department that does that, so the teachers aren't individually having to spend their time doing this on their own. You don't have thousands of people trying to figure this out. You have the department to do that. And when we have resources that we say are going to be used, then you're able to then map that and make sure it's going to match up. And then the teachers know which units will make sure that they're reaching all the state standards. And so I think that you, Dr. Corson, and your department is a real asset to our district. And I appreciate that we have you here to do that so it's not left to the teachers. And once new resources are adopted, will the mapping begin? Is that how the process works?
Yeah, so we currently have what are called guaranteed and viable curriculum maps already in place for social studies. What they don't do at this point is map the resources to those particular standards because we don't have these adopted yet. At which point the governing board does adopt materials. Then we engage teacher teams in looking at those materials and begin to kind of plot them in sequenced way around the particular units that are developed within that guaranteed and viable curriculum.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any other comments or questions? I know, Mrs. Brown, you brought up a couple things in terms of DBQ and change to 3-year. Dr. Bales, you said, I've got to eat the microphone, okay. So Dr. Bales, you said that the request by Mrs. Brown to change this to a 3-year adoption down the board and eliminate DBQ from 6th, 7th, and 8th was something that you felt that you and the curriculum department could support. Do we need to then modify the motion? Yeah, it'll have to be. Yeah, I think you would need to.
So I recommend that the curriculum, I move that the curriculum, the social studies adoption recommendation that we approve with the edits that include reducing the adoption to 3 years and eliminating the DBQ project from 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Is that?
Does that cover? I'm sorry. Does that cover everything? We have. I have no other yellow cards here.
Can we just let her speak for 3 minutes? Oh, you need a card? What's your name? So can we look and see?
Yeah, if they did, I apologize because I'm not using. Okay, not here. So I apologize if it got moved. I'm sorry, your name again? You know, I remember seeing a card for you. So, oh, wait, here we go. I missed you during the original set? Okay, I apologize and feel free to come on up.
Fortuitous that I was left out until now. I actually was one of the parents who gained access to review the textbooks. All the conversation I've been hearing tonight and regarding adopting this agenda or this curriculum on the agenda today has been in reference to the supplemental materials. But I actually reviewed, took a lot of time to review at least 2 grades worth of the textbooks. I believe it was Splash and it may have been Splash for both grades. I can't remember exactly, but it was very concerning to me. And I would say overall, if you were to just, I'm so sorry. Overall, if you were to take a high altitude view of the textbook material, you would think, oh, it's pretty good. But it's when you get down to the granular and you actually start really reading specific passages in this curriculum, it's extremely biased, very concerning to me, sheds a bad light on not only founding fathers, but the founding of our country. And I'm just concerned that all of the discussion that's taken place today has been about the supplemental material, not the actual textbooks. So I urge you to vote no, to give us more time and I know I'm a rare case of a parent in this district who got to view extensive amounts of the materials in just 2 grades of the textbooks that we're going to be voting on right now for K through 8. I don't think it's fair that most parents, I mean, the form that was sent out to get feedback from the parents in June was not a form to get parental feedback. The questions on that form were so intimidating that I know at least personally 5 people that I sent that form to please provide their input. They read the first question and go, I don't know what the state standards are. I don't know if it aligns with the state standards. Those were academic, education-minded individuals that survey was geared towards, not towards parents. My mom was one of the people who looked at that form and said, I don't know how to fill this out. I'm not an educator. I'm not sure what the state standards are. I can't say whether the curriculum aligns with the state standards. It was not a form to gain parental feedback. And the fact that the committee had 5 parents, the curriculum committee had 5 parents That's not representative of our district. And I feel like the curriculum nights that our schools hold each beginning of the school year, that's the opportunity for parents to really get in, not only see that curriculum on that one night because it's impossible to do, but just give us access. There's a lot of textbooks that your kids are not allowed to take home. They stay in the classroom their entire year. As a parent, I never get to really see it. So please vote no.
Thank you, and I do apologize again. I will, apologies. Are there any other comments or questions? I don't know, Mrs. Case, you look like you're considering.
I'm only one vote, but bringing up core knowledge, one of the reasons I would do that is so that we can get community input into the process if that was the direction we wanted to go. It would take a long time to bring core knowledge into the district, and I'm aware of that. I understand the complexities because I have asked this question literally for 15 years. And so perhaps with the 3-year adoption, perhaps we look at this and think about a bigger picture. I don't know what else to say about that.
Thank you, Mrs. Case. Anybody else? Anything? Mrs. Matura?
I just wanted to say I appreciate our teachers. Our teachers work so hard to follow all the standards and to make sure they're conforming with the law. And I really appreciate our teachers doing that, putting in the effort, putting in the time to learn all the new expectations. And I do trust that our teachers are going to follow the new laws and will teach the content appropriately. And that's really, I have faith in our teachers in our district.
Thank you, Ms. Matura. I just want to very briefly echo my thanks to everyone here. I appreciate that, having served on adoption committees before I ever served on the board. It is an extensive process, and I appreciate that everybody here and many folks, because we've heard from many folks, both with concerns about this and also in support of the recommendations. I appreciate you taking your time. I mean, that's a big lift, and I appreciate that you've done that. I think everybody up here has as well. I also appreciate Dr. Bales not just listening, but taking extensive notes in terms of the commitments that have been asked and will be made and fulfilled. I think the process that we use in terms of adoption continues to evolve and continues to improve, and we will make it better going forward, make it more extensive and as more transparent. Again, I think we do a better job than many, but that doesn't mean it's the best, and we can always improve, and I think we will. Beyond that, I do want to also echo what Mrs. Matura just said. I do have trust in our curriculum department, and I do have trust in our teachers that they understand the additional what the new law, the additional concerns that the new law creates, and they will teach appropriately. And with that, if there are no other comments or questions, or just all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
The revised motion passes 4-1. Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have ratification of vouchers. Mrs. Brown, may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Mrs. Greenberg, I abstain.
Thank you very much. Is there any opposed? Vouchers pass with one abstention. Next on the agenda is acceptance of gifts and donations. Again, we appreciate all of our donors, and there was a very extensive list this time. I want to thank in particular the PTO at Wildfire for donating $1,500 for school testing for this coming year. And with that, if anybody here is a donor, thank you in person. And if you know anyone, please thank them. And Mrs. Brown, may we have a motion to approve gifts and donations?
So moved.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We have one item for discussion. That's the instructional model, time model for Sweetwater, and I will turn it over to Dr. Bales.
President Greenberg, governing board members, cabinet and guests. At this time, we're going to have a short presentation on the instructional time models to align with new state statute for required minutes on calendars that are not 5 days. Mr. Long.
Thank you. Good evening, President Greenberg, governing board members, Dr. Bales, and PV community. This evening, I would like to present to you the first public hearing on Sweetwater Community School and Roadrunner Discovery regarding instructional time models for the 21-22 school year. Two public hearings are required to meet the obligations of House Bill 2862, which allows school districts and charter districts to adopt instructional time models, or ITMS, to meet instructional hour requirements. This bill continues to give districts the needed flexibility to meet instructional needs through remote learning, project-based learning, mastery-based learning, weekend courses, or evening courses. In addition, when districts use alternative calendars such as those for Roadrunner Discovery and Sweetwater Night School, where we offer 4-day instead of 5-day week courses, that those are now included in this newly defined public hearing process rather than the yearly submission of those calendars that we have always done in the past. As a reminder, we expanded the offerings at Sweetwater Community School to include Sweetwater PV Connect and PV Online. This expansion of offerings under one roof actually assists in our ability to share resources and improve communications while providing one-stop choice for our PV families. This organizational chart shows that 3 assistant principals are assigned to work either Sweetwater 712, PV Connect, and PV Online while reporting to the principal of Sweetwater Community School. State minimum instructional minutes are located on the left side of this slide. On the right are our proposed PV Connect instructional minutes at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. As you can see, we meet and actually exceed the minimum requirements. This is achieved through the combination of direct and independent learning. This next slide displays the class structures at each of those levels. At the high school level, students will be meeting with teachers daily for their 4 core classes. Elective classes will be offered to our PV Connect students through PV Online. Those elective classes will be self-paced. Our middle school students will meet daily for core and elective classes. At the elementary level, the morning is used for whole class instructional time, and the afternoon is reserved for core intervention, small groups, and independent practice. Legislation dictates that if more than 50% of students at a given school are learning remotely from that school, then funding is only at 95%. At Sweetwater, more than 50% of students will now be assigned to remote learning when PV Connect is added to existing enrollment. Most staffing of PV Connect is funded by federal dollars through the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, also known as ESSER. The exception being some administrative costs. Also on this slide, you can see that 100% funding will be reserved for those students who are 100% in person. Our PV Online, which is AOI, Arizona Online Instruction, is at 95%, and those students who will be involved with PV Connect will now be funded at 95%. In terms of enrollment at PV Connect currently, and this was as of yesterday, we have 54 students assigned to high school, 35 at middle, and 177 students at the elementary level. Of interesting note, as of yesterday, of the 266 students registering for PV Connect, almost 50 are currently not enrolled in PV schools at the moment. And I know PV Online is not part of this presentation tonight, but of those students who have enrolled in PV Online, 40 of those are currently not enrolled in PV schools. Our two programs that operate on a 4-day calendar and thus becomes a part of this process and public hearings are Roadrunner Discovery and Sweetwater Night School. The Roadrunner Discovery program includes 606 hours of direct instruction with additional hours of independent learning. Sweetwater Night School includes 369 hours of direct instruction. All of those students at Sweetwater Night School are full-time students at other area high schools. Students can only take a maximum of 2 classes at a time in that program. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
As this is a hearing, we do not need a motion or action.
Does anybody have any questions? Mrs. Ventura?
Clarification on the funding. Currently, in prior years for Sweetwater, were those students that were going to the classes, they were funded at 100%, is that correct?
Those students are funded at 100% and will continue to be funded at 100%. Those students who are part of PV Connect at Sweetwater will be funded at 95%.
Okay, I was.
Sorry if I was not clear
I
on that.
wasn't sure if we were losing some percentage because we merged the program. So wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also have a funding question. You said that PV Connect was being funded by the federal ESSER grant. Is that something that will evolve? Like, are we expecting to have ESSER forever?
I wish we could keep ESSER
Right.
forever.
So,
There's
but
some
we
limitation
may
on
have
that funding.
PV
So
Connect
as we move along in this process, as a district, we'll need to determine if PV Connect is something we want to keep and expand and invest in.
That's kind of what I thought. I guess this is a similar question as it relates to whether or not we continue with PV Connect, which I fully support in the future. I thought it was great for high school kids, but the core classes, 4 core classes will be, and then 2 are online for electives, which I understand, but I also pretty familiar with the limitation of electives at the PV Online level. So if we continue offering PV Connect with this model, we'll be open to improving those options in the future, correct? Okay.
Yes, we would.
Does anybody else have any other? Mrs. Bacon?
I just want to say thank you for the work that's gone into this. I know it's been a big lift to get all of this done, hiring, all of those things. So
No.
But I'll come down and talk.
we'll get your question answered.
And Ms.
Thank
Silvestri and her team have put in a lot of
Yes,
time to make this
yes.
happen. I just want to
So
make sure
please
that
pass
we
along.
acknowledge them.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Great. This was a first hearing, so this will come back, I presume, for hearing number 2 at our next meeting. That takes us to the end of our agenda. So, Mrs. Brown, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned.